There is a kind of suffering that does more than hurt you. It interrupts the story you were telling yourself about who you are, what life is supposed to be, and what you thought would make you whole. It arrives like a force that cannot be negotiated with, and suddenly the old answers stop working. The distractions become thinner. The comforting beliefs feel less convincing. The identity you built to survive begins to crack. And although most people spend their lives trying to avoid this moment, it is often the beginning of something far more important than comfort. It is the beginning of transformation. The art of becoming exceptional through suffering begins with a difficult realization. Pain reveals what ordinary life allows us to hide. When everything is easy, we can move through life unconsciously, protected by routines, opinions, and illusions of control. But when suffering enters, it removes the masks. It shows us where we are weak, where we are divided, where we have been living according to values that were never truly ours. This is why suffering can feel so destructive. It does not simply injure the surface of life. It reaches into the structure beneath it and exposes what has been unstable all along. Carl Jung understood that the path to wholeness requires a descent into the parts of ourselves we would rather avoid. The shadow, the repressed, the hidden, the inconvenient truths of our nature, all of it waits beneath the polished personality we present to the world. Suffering often drags these things into consciousness. It forces us to meet the anger we suppressed, the fear we denied, the desires we disguised, the wounds we tried to outgrow without ever understanding them. And in that confrontation, a person can either fragment further or begin the work of integration. Jung's great insight was that we do not become whole by remaining innocent. We become whole by becoming honest. Viktor Frankl saw another dimension of suffering. He believed that human beings can endure almost anything when they can locate meaning within it. Meaning does not remove pain, yet it gives pain a direction. It transforms suffering from something merely endured into something carried with purpose. Frankl's philosophy asks one of the deepest questions a person can face. What is this pain asking of me? What responsibility does this moment place in my hands? What kind of person must I become in order to meet it? It calls us out of passivity and asks us to participate consciously in the making of our lives. Nietzsche takes this even further. For him, suffering was not an unfortunate obstacle on the way to greatness. It was part of the path itself. Depth, strength, character, and originality are often born from pressure. The person who has never been tested may remain pleasant, but rarely profound. Nietzsche's challenge is severe because it asks us to stop wishing life were easier and begin asking whether we are becoming strong enough to affirm it. To become exceptional is to use even the harshest experiences as raw material for self-overcoming. This video is about that process, the movement from pain to meaning, from fragmentation to wholeness, from suffering to strength. It is for anyone who has felt broken and wondered whether that breaking could still serve a purpose. Because perhaps the wound is not the end of your story. Perhaps it is the place where the deeper story finally begins. There is a peculiar emptiness that has quietly settled over modern life. It hides beneath entertainment, productivity, ambition, and endless stimulation. Many people sense it, especially during moments when the noise briefly fades away. Perhaps late at night, after hours of scrolling through glowing screens. Perhaps during a silent drive home after another exhausting day. Perhaps in the strange feeling that despite being constantly connected to the world, they remain disconnected from themselves. The modern individual is surrounded by information, opinions, distractions, and artificial desires, yet internally feels increasingly fragmented. Something essential has been neglected for a very long time. modern civilization has created a world in which a person can spend years performing a life without ever truly living it. A man may wake up each morning and immediately reach for his phone before even hearing his own thoughts. He consumes the emotions, opinions, desires, and anxieties of thousands of strangers before the day has even begun. He moves from one distraction to another, from one obligation to the next, rarely stopping long enough to ask himself a simple but terrifying question: who am I beneath all of this? Many people no longer know. Their attention has become colonized by endless stimulation. Silence feels uncomfortable, solitude feels threatening, stillness feels unbearable, and so they continue moving, not because they know where they are going, but because stopping would force them to confront what has been buried beneath years of distraction. Carl Jung believed that much of human suffering emerges from this unconscious way of living. He believed that modern people had become estranged from their own souls. They had lost contact with the deeper dimensions of the psyche and instead identified almost entirely with surface-level identities constructed for social survival. In many ways, modern civilization rewards this condition. Society encourages people to become efficient, attractive, successful, entertaining, productive, and socially acceptable. Yet it rarely encourages them to become whole. The result is a culture filled with individuals who appear functional externally while internally carrying profound confusion, anxiety, emptiness, and emotional exhaustion. Somewhere along the way, many people stopped living as themselves. They became who they believed they needed to become in order to be accepted by others. Productive enough, attractive enough, intelligent enough, funny enough, successful enough. They learned which emotions were acceptable and which needed to be hidden. They learned how to present themselves in ways that would receive approval and avoid rejection. Over time, the performance became automatic. The role hardened. And beneath years of adaptation, something authentic slowly disappeared into the background. Jung observed that human beings possess an extraordinary ability to deceive themselves. A person may spend decades perfecting an identity without realizing that the identity itself is artificial. They may become admired by others while remaining completely unknown to themselves. Jung referred to this social mask as the persona. In his work, 2 Essays on Analytical Psychology, he writes, "The persona is a complicated system of relations between individual consciousness and society. Fittingly enough, a kind of mask, designed on the one hand to make a definite impression upon others, and on the other to conceal the true nature of the individual. The persona is not inherently evil. It is necessary for social life. Every person must adapt to society to some extent. We speak differently at work than we do with close friends. We behave differently around strangers than we do in private. Civilization itself depends on a degree of performance and restraint. The problem begins when the individual completely identifies with the mask, when the role replaces the person beneath it. When a man no longer knows whether he's expressing himself authentically or merely repeating patterns designed to maintain approval. This danger has become especially severe in the modern world because technology has transformed identity itself into a performance. Social media allows individuals to carefully construct images of themselves for constant public display. Every moment is unconsciously evaluated according to how it will appear to others. The modern person exists beneath an invisible audience. Even in solitude, many continue performing internally for imagined observers. They no longer ask what they genuinely feel. They ask what version of themselves should be presented. Jung warned of the psychological consequences of this condition. In The Archetypes and the Collective Unconscious, he writes, "The danger is that people identify with their personas. The professor with his textbook, the tenor with his voice. One could say with a little exaggeration, the persona is what one is not, but what oneself as well as others think one is." This identification with the persona creates profound psychological instability because the false self requires constant maintenance. The individual becomes dependent on validation in order to sustain the illusion. Praise becomes psychologically addictive. Criticism becomes unbearable. Rejection feels catastrophic because it threatens the fragile identity constructed for survival. The person slowly loses contact with their genuine emotions, instincts, desires, and inner contradictions. They become divided against themselves. Modern society intensifies this fragmentation at every level. Algorithms reward visibility rather than authenticity. Comparison culture transforms human beings into competitors trapped within endless hierarchies of status and appearance. People begin measuring their worth according to external reactions rather than internal truth. They compare their private suffering to the carefully edited lives of others. They suppress weakness because vulnerability threatens the image they are attempting to maintain. They smile while exhausted. They appear confident while internally anxious. They appear successful while emotionally empty. The tragedy is that this condition often goes unnoticed because it is socially rewarded. A person can receive admiration while psychologically collapsing beneath the surface. They can achieve external success while internally feeling fragmented, numb, and alienated from themselves. Jung understood that one of the greatest dangers of modern civilization is that it disconnects human beings from the deeper reality of their own psyche. The modern individual becomes trapped on the surface of life. Everything becomes externalized. Attention is directed outward constantly towards screens, status, productivity, entertainment, and social approval, while the inner world remains neglected and unconscious. This inner neglect eventually produces suffering. Anxiety emerges without clear explanation. Depression appears despite material comfort. Emotional exhaustion becomes chronic. Many people feel an invisible emptiness they cannot fully explain because the problem does not exist solely in external circumstances. The deeper issue is psychological disconnection. The individual has lost contact with themselves. Jung believed that beneath the conscious personality exists an immense unconscious world containing forgotten emotions, hidden fears, rejected desires, instincts, memories, symbolic images, and unrealized potential. Yet modern people spend much of their lives attempting to avoid this inner reality. They remain constantly distracted because distraction protects them from self-confrontation. Endless entertainment becomes anesthesia. Noise becomes protection against silence. Overworking becomes escape. Consumption becomes sedative. People exhaust themselves psychologically in order to avoid being alone with their own thoughts. In Modern Man in Search of a Soul, Jung writes, "People will do anything, no matter how absurd, in order to avoid facing their own souls." This sentence reveals something deeply unsettling about human nature. The fear of self-confrontation often exceeds the fear of suffering itself. Many people remain trapped in destructive patterns because unconsciousness feels safer than truth. To truly face oneself means confronting contradictions, weaknesses, envy, insecurity, suppressed anger, loneliness, and the painful realization that much of one's life may have been shaped by unconscious fear rather than authentic choice. Most people instinctively avoid this encounter. The psyche develops countless methods of escape. Stimulation becomes endless, attention becomes fragmented, silence becomes intolerable because silence removes distraction and reveals what has been buried underneath. Yet Jung believed that what remains unconscious does not disappear. It continues influencing behavior from the shadows. Patterns repeat themselves mysteriously. Emotional reactions feel irrational. Destructive habits persist despite conscious intentions. Individuals sabotage relationships, repeat the same mistakes, and remain trapped in cycles they do not understand because unconscious forces continue directing their lives beneath awareness. This is why Jung famously wrote in collected works, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." Many people interpret fate as something external happening to them, while Jung believed much of what people call fate originates internally from unconscious patterns they have never examined. A person who has never confronted their fear of rejection may repeatedly destroy relationships without understanding why. A person who unconsciously craves approval may spend their entire life pursuing external success while remaining internally miserable. A person who refuses to confront loneliness may drown themselves in endless distraction while secretly feeling emotionally dead inside. The unconscious continues operating regardless of whether one acknowledges it. For Jung, the solution was not self-improvement in the modern sense. He believed the greatest task of human life was becoming conscious, becoming real, recovering the lost connection to one's authentic inner self beneath years of adaptation and performance. This process is painful because it requires dismantling illusions. The persona resists dissolution because it has often become intertwined with survival itself. People fear that without the mask they will lose acceptance, status, love, or identity. Yet remaining trapped inside the persona creates another kind of suffering, the slow death of individuality. In Memories, Dreams, Reflections, Jung writes, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." This sentence contains the essence of Jung's philosophy. Becoming oneself is not automatic. It is not guaranteed by age, success, or experience. Many people die having never truly encountered themselves beneath the masks they spent their lives maintaining. To become who you truly are requires courage because it demands honesty. It requires descending into the hidden regions of the psyche that modern society encourages people to avoid. It requires silence in a world addicted to noise. It requires self-confrontation in a culture obsessed with distraction. And above all, it requires the willingness to abandon false identities that once provided psychological safety. The modern person has lost himself because he has spent too much time looking outward and too little time looking within. He knows how to present himself to the world, but he no longer understands the deeper forces moving inside him. He has mastered performance while remaining a stranger to his own soul. Jung believed that transformation begins precisely at the moment when the individual becomes aware of this fragmentation. The moment when a person realizes that beneath the social mask, beneath the endless distractions, beneath the carefully constructed identity, there remains an unexplored self waiting in silence. Beneath the personality that a person presents to the world, beneath the carefully constructed identity designed to appear acceptable, civilized, and controlled, there exists another side of the psyche that remains hidden from conscious awareness. A darker region of the mind where rejected emotions, forbidden impulses, painful insecurities, and unacknowledged desires continue to exist in concealed form. Carl Jung referred to this hidden dimension as the shadow. It is one of the most disturbing and important concepts in all of psychology, because it forces the individual to confront a terrifying possibility. Much of what controls human behavior exists outside conscious awareness. Most people prefer to imagine themselves as rational, moral, and self-aware. They construct an image of who they believe they are and cling to it desperately. They want to see themselves as kind rather than cruel, disciplined rather than weak, humble rather than arrogant, peaceful rather than aggressive. Yet the human psyche is far more complicated than the conscious image a person holds about themselves. Within every individual exists enormous psychological tension. Human beings are capable of love and hatred, compassion and violence, generosity and selfishness, honesty and deception. But the conscious mind cannot easily tolerate contradiction. It wants coherence. It wants to believe that it is good. And so the qualities that threaten this self-image are often denied, suppressed, or pushed into the unconscious mind. The shadow is formed precisely through this process of rejection. Everything that the conscious personality refuses to identify with begins accumulating in the hidden regions of the psyche. Anger that could not be expressed, envy that feels shameful, fear that threatens the image of strength, resentment toward others, violent fantasies, destructive impulses, insecurity, lust, bitterness, hatred, ambition, the desire for power, the desire to dominate, the desire to escape responsibility. All the qualities a person wishes to avoid seeing within themselves continue existing unconsciously in the shadow. The civilized personality may attempt to deny these aspects, but denial does not eliminate them. The psyche does not work this way. What is rejected consciously remains alive unconsciously. Modern society encourages this repression constantly. From childhood, people are taught which emotions are socially acceptable and which must remain hidden. A child quickly learns that certain expressions of anger, selfishness, sadness, vulnerability, or aggression threaten approval from parents, teachers, and society itself. As a result, the individual begins constructing a socially acceptable personality while burying the disapproved aspects of themselves deeper into the unconscious. Over time, this process becomes automatic. The individual no longer realizes they are suppressing parts of themselves because the rejection has become unconscious. They genuinely believe the mask represents the entirety of who they are, yet the shadow does not disappear simply because it has been hidden. Jung understood that suppressed psychic material gains strength in darkness. The more intensely a person attempts to appear pure, virtuous, harmless, or perfect, the more pressure accumulates beneath the surface. The rejected aspects of the personality begin operating indirectly, influencing behavior from behind the scenes. This is why individuals are often shocked by their own actions during moments of emotional breakdown. A person who prides themselves on calmness suddenly erupts with uncontrollable rage. A person who believes themselves morally superior becomes consumed by jealousy and resentment. A person who outwardly condemns selfishness secretly manipulates others for personal gain. These eruptions are not random. They are manifestations of unconscious material that has remained unintegrated for too long. In Aion, Jung writes, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." This statement stands in direct opposition to the modern obsession with positivity and self-image. Many people approach personal growth as an attempt to eliminate darkness entirely. They wish to become purely good, purely disciplined, purely peaceful. Yet Jung understood that genuine transformation does not occur through denial of the darker aspects of human nature. Enlightenment is not achieved by pretending darkness does not exist. The individual who attempts to appear endlessly positive often becomes psychologically fragile because they remain unconscious of the forces operating within them. They fear their own aggression, their own envy, their own capacity for destruction. As a result, they become divided against themselves. The danger of the unconscious shadow becomes especially visible through projection. Projection occurs when a person unconsciously attributes rejected qualities within themselves onto others. The traits they refuse to acknowledge internally become emotionally exaggerated when perceived externally. This is why certain individuals provoke irrational emotional reactions. A person may become consumed with hatred toward arrogance because they secretly desire recognition and superiority themselves. Another may constantly condemn weakness because they fear their own vulnerability. Someone who aggressively attacks dishonesty may themselves be deeply deceptive. The unconscious mind externalizes what it refuses to confront internally. Jung writes in his collected works, Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. This sentence reveals an uncomfortable truth about human relationships. Often, the qualities that provoke the strongest emotional reactions are reflections of unresolved aspects of the self. The individual believes they are merely reacting to external reality, while unconsciously, they are encountering fragments of their own shadow. Entire lives can be spent unconsciously projecting rejected qualities onto enemies, strangers, political groups, partners, or society itself. The individual becomes obsessed with fighting evil externally, while remaining blind to the chaos within their own psyche. Projection allows the ego to preserve its illusion of innocence. It is psychologically easier to condemn darkness in others than to recognize it within oneself. Yet the more intensely a person denies their shadow, the more dangerous it becomes. Suppressed psychic material does not remain passive. It seeks expression. Sometimes this occurs through addictions. A person overwhelmed by unconscious emotional tension may seek escape through alcohol, drugs, pornography, endless entertainment, or compulsive consumption. Others experience emotional explosions that seem disproportionate to the situation itself. Years of suppressed resentment suddenly erupt with terrifying intensity. Passive aggression emerges because direct confrontation feels too threatening to the conscious personality. Self-sabotage becomes chronic because unconscious guilt or fear quietly undermines conscious goals. Many people unknowingly organize their entire lives around avoiding confrontation with the shadow. They remain endlessly busy because silence allows unconscious material to surface. They surround themselves with stimulation because distraction suppresses self-awareness. They become addicted to productivity because inner stillness feels psychologically dangerous. Beneath constant activity often exists a profound fear of encountering what has been buried within the unconscious mind. Jung believed that the encounter with the shadow is one of the most painful experiences in psychological development because it destroys the comforting illusion that one is entirely virtuous or fully conscious. In Psychology and Religion, he writes, "The shadow is a moral problem that challenges the whole ego personality. For no one can become conscious of the shadow without considerable moral effort." This confrontation requires extraordinary honesty because it forces the individual to recognize qualities they have spent their entire life attempting to avoid. The individual must acknowledge envy without rationalization, aggression without denial, hatred without projection, selfishness without excuses, fear without performance. Very few people willingly undertake this confrontation because it threatens the carefully constructed identity of the conscious ego. The persona wishes to appear good. The shadow reveals something far more complicated. Yet Jung did not view the shadow as purely negative. The shadow does not contain only destructive qualities. It also contains unrealized strength, creativity, instinct, passion, authenticity, and vitality that have been suppressed alongside darker impulses. Many people repress their assertiveness because they fear conflict. They repress ambition because they fear judgment. They repress emotional intensity because they fear rejection. Entire dimensions of human potential remain trapped within the shadow because society encouraged their suppression early in life. This is why individuals who appear outwardly harmless are often internally weak rather than genuinely virtuous. They have not transcended aggression, they have merely repressed it. Jung understood that a person incapable of confrontation or destruction is not psychologically whole. They are psychologically incomplete. True maturity emerges when the individual becomes conscious of their darker capacities while learning to integrate and control them responsibly. A person who has integrated the shadow possesses a different kind of presence. They no longer fear their own darkness because they have acknowledged it. They become more emotionally grounded because they are no longer exhausting themselves maintaining illusions of perfection. Their aggression becomes controlled rather than explosive. Their honesty becomes deeper because self-deception decreases. They stop projecting unconscious chaos onto the world around them. They become capable of genuine compassion because they understand the complexity of human nature within themselves. In Ion, Jung writes, "The meeting with oneself is, at first, the meeting with one's own shadow." This meeting is deeply unsettling because the individual begins realizing how much of their personality has remained unconscious. They discover hidden motivations behind behaviors they once considered rational. They recognize envy hidden beneath moral judgment, fear hidden beneath arrogance, weakness hidden beneath aggression. The individual slowly realizes that the human psyche is not a neatly ordered structure, but a battlefield of conflicting forces, instincts, desires, and contradictions. Modern culture rarely encourages this kind of self-confrontation. Society prefers surfaces. It rewards performance, certainty, and simplicity. The shadow threatens all of these illusions because it reveals the chaotic complexity beneath the civilized personality. Yet Jung believed that avoiding this confrontation condemns the individual to unconsciousness. What remains hidden continues influencing behavior invisibly. The person becomes possessed by forces they refuse to acknowledge. Entire societies can become consumed by collective shadows when individuals project their darkness outward rather than confronting it internally. History repeatedly demonstrates how dangerous unconsciousness becomes on both personal and collective levels. To encounter the shadow is to descend into the hidden regions of the psyche where the rejected self continues waiting in darkness. This descent feels frightening because the ego fears losing control. Yet Jung believed this confrontation is necessary for transformation. The individual who refuses to face their darkness remains psychologically fragmented. They remain divided between the image they present consciously and the unconscious forces operating beneath the surface. True wholeness becomes impossible without integration of the shadow. The modern individual often searches endlessly for external solutions to inner suffering, while remaining completely disconnected from the unconscious conflicts shaping their life. They seek distractions instead of self-knowledge. They seek validation instead of truth. Yet beneath the noise of modern existence, the shadow continues speaking through anxiety, resentment, emotional instability, addiction, envy, and psychological exhaustion. The unconscious demands recognition, and until the individual develops the courage to descend inward and confront what has been hidden, they remain strangers not only to their darkness, but to themselves. Human beings spend enormous amounts of energy attempting to escape suffering. Nearly every aspect of modern civilization is designed around distraction from pain. The moment discomfort appears, people instinctively reach for something that will numb, entertain, stimulate, or sedate the mind. Endless scrolling fills moments of silence. Entertainment occupies emotional emptiness. Consumption provides temporary relief from inner tension. Dopamine becomes a form of psychological anesthesia. Modern people rarely sit alone with suffering long enough to understand what it is trying to communicate. Pain is immediately treated as an interruption, an inconvenience, or a defect that must be eliminated as quickly as possible. Yet Carl Jung believed that psychological suffering often possesses profound meaning. He understood that symptoms such as anxiety, depression, emotional instability, exhaustion, and inner emptiness are not always meaningless malfunctions of the mind. Often they emerge because the psyche itself has become divided. The conscious personality moves in one direction while deeper parts of the self resist silently beneath the surface. The individual may continue functioning externally while internally drifting further away from their authentic nature. At first, this disconnection appears manageable. The person distracts themselves, they remain busy, they continue performing socially. But eventually the unconscious begins demanding attention. and when ignored for too long, the psyche begins expressing its suffering through symptoms. Modern culture encourages people to believe that a successful life should feel constantly pleasurable, stimulating, and emotionally comfortable. Suffering is treated almost as a failure of optimization. If a person feels empty, anxious, or depressed, they often assume something is fundamentally wrong with them. Yet Jung approached suffering differently. He believed psychological pain frequently emerges during periods of inner transformation. The psyche suffers when it can no longer tolerate the distance between the false life being lived consciously and the deeper truth buried unconsciously. In many cases, suffering becomes the first sign that the soul itself is demanding change. In Symbols of Transformation, Jung writes, "There is no coming to consciousness without pain." This sentence reveals something essential about human development. Consciousness itself carries a cost. To become psychologically aware means confronting truths the ego would rather avoid. It means recognizing self-deception, confronting unresolved fears, examining destructive patterns, and dismantling illusions that once provided emotional security. The unconscious resists this process because it threatens the stability of the existing personality. A person may remain attached to relationships that are destroying them, careers that drain them, identities that suffocate them, or patterns that produce endless misery simply because the unknown feels more frightening than familiar suffering. For this reason, transformation often begins with collapse. Many people only begin questioning their lives after reaching a point of psychological exhaustion, where the old way of living becomes unbearable. A crisis emerges, anxiety intensifies, depression deepens, emotional numbness spreads. The individual begins feeling internally trapped. Something within the psyche refuses to continue functioning according to the old structure. What appears externally as breakdown may internally be the beginning of reorganization. Jung observed that many psychological symptoms originate from unresolved inner conflict. Anxiety, for example, often emerges when opposing forces within the psyche remain unreconciled. The conscious mind may pursue goals that conflict with deeper emotional needs or instincts. A person may spend years trying to become successful according to society's standards, while unconsciously longing for an entirely different life. Another may suppress anger for decades in order to appear peaceful, only to develop chronic inner tension and emotional instability. The psyche cannot remain divided indefinitely without consequences. Anxiety frequently arises because something unconscious is struggling for recognition. Depression too can carry symbolic meaning. Modern individuals often experience profound emptiness, despite material comfort, social status, or external success. They feel emotionally disconnected from life itself. Jung understood that this emptiness often emerges when the individual loses contact with meaning. Human beings require more than stimulation and survival. They require purpose, direction, and connection to something psychologically significant. When life becomes reduced entirely to consumption, performance, distraction, and routine, the soul begins withdrawing its energy from conscious existence. Depression can become a form of psychic paralysis, in which the unconscious refuses to continue supporting a life that feels spiritually dead. This does not mean all suffering is noble or romantic. Jung never glorified pain for its own sake. Suffering becomes destructive when it remains unconscious and meaningless. The danger lies in refusing to learn from suffering. Many individuals experience the same psychological patterns repeatedly because they never examine the deeper causes beneath their pain. They continue escaping into distraction while the unconscious continues producing symptoms. They attempt to silence anxiety without understanding the conflict generating it. They numb depression without questioning the emptiness beneath it. As a result, suffering repeats itself endlessly because the underlying psychological imbalance remains unresolved. In his collected works, Jung writes, "Neurosis is always a substitute for legitimate suffering." This is one of Jung's most unsettling ideas. Often the psyche creates neurotic symptoms because the individual refuses to confront a deeper emotional reality directly. Legitimate suffering may involve grief, loneliness, fear, uncertainty, failure, confrontation with mortality, or the painful necessity of change. Yet many people attempt to avoid these experiences entirely. The psyche responds by generating indirect suffering through anxiety disorders, compulsions, emotional instability, addictions, and chronic inner conflict. The avoided pain does not disappear. It transforms into something else. The modern world intensifies this process because it provides endless methods of escape. A person can avoid themselves almost indefinitely. Every uncomfortable emotion can be drowned beneath stimulation. The individual no longer needs to sit with loneliness because entertainment is always available. They no longer need to reflect because constant information floods consciousness continuously. They no longer need to confront existential questions because distraction fills every empty moment. Yet beneath this endless activity, the unconscious remains active. The avoided suffering accumulates in darkness. There comes a point in many lives when the old structure collapses entirely. A relationship ends, a career loses meaning, a person experiences profound grief, betrayal, failure, or emotional exhaustion. The identity that once provided stability begins disintegrating. Jung viewed such moments not merely as catastrophes, but as potential psychological turning points. Throughout mythology and religious symbolism, transformation is repeatedly associated with descent into darkness. The hero enters the underworld, the old self dies, chaos emerges before rebirth becomes possible. Jung recognized this pattern psychologically. The unconscious often destroys false structures before deeper transformation can occur. This is why periods of suffering can feel profoundly disorienting. The individual senses that something old is dying internally, yet they cannot clearly see what will emerge afterward. The ego fears dissolution because it interprets uncertainty as danger. Yet the unconscious may already be attempting to guide the individual toward a more authentic form of existence. Crises force questions that comfort suppresses. They force the individual to examine their values, fears, relationships, desires, and patterns more honestly. Many people spend years asleep psychologically until suffering finally interrupts the illusion. In Psychology and Alchemy, Jung writes, "The greatest and most important problems of life are all fundamentally insoluble. They can never be solved but only outgrown." This statement reveals Jung's understanding of psychological maturity. Certain dimensions of human existence cannot be eliminated entirely. Fear, mortality, loneliness, uncertainty, inner conflict, and suffering remain permanent aspects of life. The individual who seeks permanent emotional comfort becomes trapped in endless avoidance because life itself cannot provide such certainty. Psychological growth occurs when consciousness expands enough to contain suffering without being destroyed by it. The individual does not eliminate pain entirely. They become larger than the suffering itself. This process often transforms a person completely. Someone who has consciously endured suffering develops a different relationship with life. Their perception deepens, their values change, illusions lose their power, superficial concerns begin fading into the background. Many people who undergo genuine psychological crises emerge with greater authenticity because suffering stripped away false identities they could no longer maintain. The collapse became necessary for transformation. Jung himself experienced profound psychological suffering throughout his life. During his confrontation with the unconscious following his separation from Sigmund Freud, he descended into terrifying inner experiences filled with visions, dreams, symbolic imagery, and emotional chaos. Rather than fleeing from this confrontation, Jung chose to explore it directly. He recorded these experiences in what later became known as the Red Book. He understood that the unconscious could become both destructive and transformative depending on whether the individual approached it consciously or attempted to repress it blindly. Suffering possesses the potential to awaken consciousness because it interrupts unconscious living. Comfort often keeps people asleep psychologically. Routine creates illusion of permanence. Distraction prevents introspection, but suffering tears through these illusions. Suddenly, the individual is forced to confront reality more directly. They begin questioning who they are, how they have lived, and what truly matters. The superficial layers of personality weaken during crisis, allowing deeper dimensions of the psyche to emerge. In Memories, Dreams, Reflections, Jung writes, "I am not what happened to me. I am what I choose to become." This sentence captures the transformative potential hidden within suffering. Human beings cannot always control what happens to them. Loss, betrayal, illness, loneliness, failure, and tragedy remain unavoidable aspects of existence. Yet suffering does not completely determine the individual. What matters psychologically is whether suffering leads toward unconscious bitterness or deeper consciousness. One person becomes consumed by resentment after pain. Another becomes more self-aware, compassionate, and authentic. The same suffering can either imprison or transform, depending on how it is confronted. Many individuals remain trapped because they resist the psychological meaning hidden within their suffering. They desperately attempt to return to who they were before the crisis began. Yet transformation often requires allowing the old self to die. Certain illusions must collapse. Certain identities must dissolve. Certain unconscious patterns must be abandoned. The psyche resists this because familiarity feels safe, even when destructive. But the unconscious continually pushes toward wholeness. Symptoms intensify when the individual refuses necessary change. Suffering becomes the beginning of transformation precisely because it destroys unconsciousness. It forces confrontation. It strips away distractions. It reveals the instability of false identities and shallow pursuits. Beneath emotional pain often lies a deeper invitation from the psyche itself, an invitation to become conscious, to confront what has been avoided, and to begin living in closer alignment with one's deeper nature. The path through this process is frightening because it requires descending into uncertainty without knowing exactly what will emerge afterward. Yet Jung believed this descent is necessary. Without confronting suffering consciously, the individual remains psychologically fragmented, forever running from themselves while the unconscious continues speaking through pain. For Carl Jung, the ultimate goal of psychological development was not happiness in the ordinary sense. It was not social success, moral perfection, status, approval, or emotional comfort. The central task of human life was something far deeper and far more difficult: individuation. This was the name Jung gave to the lifelong process of becoming psychologically whole, a process through which the fragmented pieces of the personality gradually become integrated into a more conscious and authentic self. Jung believed that most human beings never fully complete this journey because it demands something that modern civilization quietly discourages: radical self-confrontation. Individuation begins when the individual becomes aware that they are divided internally. The persona presents one image to the world. The shadow hides another reality beneath the surface. Conscious beliefs often conflict with unconscious desires. Rational thoughts conflict with instincts, emotions, fears, and forgotten aspects of the psyche. Most people attempt to avoid this tension by identifying entirely with one side of themselves while suppressing the rest. Yet the human personality cannot become whole through suppression. The rejected parts continue living unconsciously, influencing thoughts, emotions, relationships, and behavior from beneath awareness. Jung believed that genuine transformation occurs only when the individual consciously begins integrating these hidden dimensions into a more complete self. This process is painful because it dismantles illusions. The ego wants certainty, it wants stability, it wants a fixed identity that feels safe and socially acceptable. Individuation threatens these structures because it forces the individual to question inherited beliefs, unconscious patterns, social conditioning, and the roles they have spent years performing. The individual slowly realizes that much of what they considered their identity was absorbed unconsciously from family, society, culture, fear, and collective expectations. Opinions they never truly examined, ambitions they inherited from others, moral beliefs adopted without reflection, desires shaped by comparison and imitation. The deeper the self-examination becomes, the more difficult it becomes to distinguish between what is genuinely one's own and what was merely conditioned into existence. Modern society rarely encourages this process because conformity is psychologically convenient. Civilization rewards adaptation far more than authenticity. Individuals are trained from childhood to seek approval, follow collective norms, and avoid behaviors that threaten social acceptance. Entire systems of education, media, and culture subtly encourage imitation. People learn what to desire by observing what others admire. They shape their personalities according to social incentives rather than inner truth. The result is a civilization filled with individuals who outwardly appear unique, while internally remaining psychologically dependent on the collective. Jung understood how dangerous this unconscious conformity becomes. A person who has never examined themselves deeply often mistakes collective opinion for personal conviction. They fear separation from the group because belonging feels safer than uncertainty. The crowd provides psychological protection. Shared beliefs reduce anxiety. Conformity allows the individual to avoid confronting difficult existential questions independently. Yet this comfort comes at an enormous cost, the sacrifice of individuality. In his collected works, Jung writes, "Individuation means becoming an individual, and, insofar as individuality embraces our innermost, last, and incomparable uniqueness, it also implies becoming one's own self." This sentence captures the essence of Jung's philosophy. Individuation is not selfish individualism in the modern sense. It is not narcissistic self-expression or rebellion for its own sake. Jung was describing something much deeper, the gradual emergence of the authentic self hidden beneath layers of unconscious conditioning. The individuated person does not simply reject society blindly, they develop an inner center independent from collective pressure. Their values emerge from conscious reflection rather than imitation. They become psychologically rooted within themselves. This process requires tremendous courage because separating psychologically from the crowd often produces loneliness. Many people remain unconscious precisely because consciousness isolates them from collective illusions. The individual who begins questioning inherited values may feel alienated from those around them. They may lose certainty, old identities dissolve, relationships built upon false roles begin weakening. The familiar structures of life become unstable. Jung understood that individuation frequently feels like entering unknown territory where the old self no longer functions, but the new self has not fully emerged. For this reason, many individuals retreat back into conformity whenever self-discovery becomes uncomfortable. It feels easier to continue performing socially accepted roles than to confront the uncertainty involved in genuine transformation. The unconscious constantly tempts the individual toward comfort, distraction, and imitation because consciousness itself demands effort. To become oneself requires sustained attention toward the inner world. It requires questioning patterns that once felt natural. It requires honesty about fears, weaknesses, contradictions, and hidden motivations. Most people avoid this process because it threatens psychological stability. Yet Jung believed that remaining psychologically asleep produces another form of suffering. The unconscious individual may appear outwardly adjusted while internally feeling empty, fragmented, and disconnected from meaning. They continue pursuing goals they never consciously chose. They seek validation from people who cannot truly know them because they themselves remain unknown internally. Their lives become organized around adaptation rather than authenticity. Over time, the psyche begins resisting this condition through anxiety, depression, emotional exhaustion, and unconscious conflict. The deeper self demands recognition. Individuation therefore involves far more than intellectual understanding. It is a transformation of consciousness itself. The individual must gradually become aware of the unconscious forces shaping their life. They must integrate the shadow rather than projecting it outward. They must develop a relationship with their emotions rather than remaining possessed by them unconsciously. They must balance instinct and reason instead of identifying exclusively with one side of the psyche. Jung believed that wholeness emerges through integration of opposites. The mature personality does not eliminate contradiction entirely, it learns to contain complexity consciously. One of the most important aspects of individuation is the development of self-awareness. Modern individuals often move through life automatically, reacting habitually without examining the deeper psychological forces beneath their behavior. Jung encouraged individuals to study themselves honestly, to observe recurring emotional patterns, to examine dreams, to confront irrational fears and projections, to recognize how unconscious wounds continue shaping relationships and choices. Self-awareness gradually weakens unconscious possession. The individual begins seeing themselves more clearly rather than through idealized self-images. This process also reconnects the individual with meaning. Jung believed that human beings require more than material success or external achievement in order to feel psychologically alive. The psyche longs for connection with something deeper than surface existence. In Modern Man in Search of a Soul, Jung writes, "The decisive question for man is he related to something infinite or not?" Modern civilization often strips life of symbolic and spiritual depth. Everything becomes practical, measurable, externalized, and material. Yet the human psyche continues searching for meaning beyond mere survival and consumption. When individuals lose connection with deeper values, symbolic understanding, or existential purpose, life begins feeling empty regardless of external comfort. Individuation reconnects the person to this deeper dimension of existence. The individual no longer lives purely according to external expectations. They begin orienting themselves toward inner truth. Jung understood that this inner orientation changes perception entirely. The individuated person gradually stops seeking identity exclusively through social approval. They become less psychologically dependent on collective validation because their center of gravity shifts inward. They no longer require constant external confirmation in order to feel real. Their relationship with themselves deepens. They become capable of solitude because they are no longer entirely estranged from their own psyche. Silence becomes less frightening because self-confrontation no longer feels unbearable. In Memories, Dreams, Reflections, Jung writes, "Your vision will become clear only when you can look into your own heart. Who looks outside, dreams. Who looks inside, awakes." Modern people spend enormous amounts of time looking outward. They compare themselves constantly to others. They absorb endless opinions, trends, ideologies, and distractions from the external world. Yet inwardly they remain undeveloped. Jung believed awakening begins precisely at the moment when attention turns inwards. The individual begins observing the hidden dimensions of their own psyche, rather than remaining hypnotized entirely by external reality. This inward movement feels unsettling because the unconscious initially appears chaotic, contradictory, and unfamiliar. Yet through this confrontation, consciousness expands. Individuation also requires confronting fear directly. Fear often guards the boundaries of the false self. People fear rejection because the persona depends upon approval. They fear uncertainty because unconscious structures provide emotional security. They fear confronting the shadow because it threatens their idealized self-image. They fear solitude because silence exposes unresolved inner conflict. Jung believed these fears must be approached consciously rather than avoided endlessly. The path toward wholeness leads directly through psychological discomfort. As the process deepens, the individual gradually becomes more integrated internally. their actions align more closely with their authentic values. Emotional reactions become more conscious. They stop exhausting themselves maintaining false identities. Their relationship with suffering changes because they understand its symbolic and transformative dimensions. They become psychologically stronger precisely because they are no longer divided against themselves unconsciously. Yet individuation never truly ends. Jung viewed it as a lifelong process rather than a final state of perfection. The psyche continues unfolding throughout life. New unconscious material emerges continuously. The individual repeatedly encounters deeper dimensions of themselves over time. This is why Jung described individuation as the privilege of a lifetime. Many people spend their entire lives trapped within collective expectations, unconscious fears, inherited identities, and socially constructed masks. They remain strangers to themselves until death. Jung believed the greatest tragedy was not suffering itself, but unconsciousness. To live without ever encountering one's authentic self, to remain psychologically asleep while believing oneself awake. Individuation therefore becomes an act of psychological liberation. The individual slowly withdraws identification from false roles and unconscious patterns. They begin living with greater honesty toward themselves. Their life gains symbolic depth and existential meaning. They stop existing merely as a reflection of collective expectations. They become individuals in the deepest sense of the word, conscious participants in their own existence rather than unconscious products of external conditioning. For Jung, this was the true purpose of psychological development. The integration of the fragmented psyche into a more conscious and authentic self capable of confronting life directly. A human being who no longer flees endlessly from their own nature, but gradually learns to inhabit it fully. Understanding psychological ideas intellectually is not enough to transform a human being. A person can read philosophy for years, study psychology endlessly, memorize quotes about consciousness and self-awareness, and still remain deeply unconscious in daily life. Knowledge alone does not dissolve the shadow. It does not heal fragmentation. It does not reconnect a person with their authentic self. Carl Jung understood that genuine transformation requires direct confrontation with one's own psyche through lived experience. The unconscious cannot be integrated through abstract thinking alone. It reveals itself gradually through observation, reflection, suffering, relationships, dreams, emotional reactions, habits, fears, desires, and the countless unconscious patterns hidden within ordinary life. Modern individuals often search for dramatic solutions to psychological suffering while ignoring the quiet daily practices that slowly reshape consciousness. They look for instant transformation, permanent motivation, or some external event that will suddenly make them feel whole. Yet Jung's philosophy points towards something slower and more difficult. The process of becoming oneself unfolds through continuous self-observation and honest confrontation with inner reality. Transformation occurs gradually, often painfully, through repeated moments of awareness in which unconscious patterns become visible. The individual begins noticing the hidden forces shaping thoughts, emotions, behaviors, and relationships. Over time, consciousness deepens. One of the first and most important steps in this process is learning to spend time alone. Modern people are terrified of silence because silence exposes what distraction conceals. Many individuals move from one form of stimulation to another almost automatically. Music, videos, social media, conversations, entertainment, constant information. The mind rarely becomes still enough for unconscious material to emerge into awareness. Silence creates psychological discomfort. because it removes escape routes. Thoughts become louder, emotions surface, forgotten anxieties return. The individual begins encountering themselves without distraction. This is precisely why solitude is necessary. Jung believed the unconscious speaks most clearly when external noise diminishes. Dreams become more vivid, emotional patterns become easier to observe, hidden fears rise into awareness. The individual begins recognizing how fragmented their attention has become. At first, this confrontation feels deeply uncomfortable because modern people are conditioned to fear stillness. Silence often reveals loneliness, emptiness, unresolved conflict, and psychological exhaustion that endless stimulation had temporarily hidden. Yet without entering silence consciously, the individual remains trapped on the surface of their own mind. Spending time alone does not mean isolation from humanity. It means developing the capacity to remain present with oneself without immediately escaping into distraction. Even short periods of solitude begin changing perception. A person notices how compulsively they reach for stimulation whenever discomfort appears. They become aware of restless thoughts that previously remained unconscious. They begin hearing the deeper emotional atmosphere beneath their daily routines. Jung understood that this inward attention is essential because transformation cannot occur while consciousness remains completely absorbed by external reality. Another crucial practice involves observing emotional triggers carefully. Strong emotional reactions often reveal unconscious shadow material hidden beneath the surface of the personality. Most people instinctively justify their reactions externally without examining the deeper psychological forces involved. They become angry, jealous, defensive, resentful, or emotionally overwhelmed while remaining convinced that the problem exists entirely outside themselves. Yet intense emotional reactions frequently point toward unresolved inner conflict. A person who reacts with disproportionate rage toward criticism may unconsciously carry deep insecurity about their worth. Someone consumed by envy may have abandoned important desires within themselves long ago. Another who constantly condemns weakness may secretly fear their own vulnerability. The unconscious reveals itself through emotional intensity because the psyche becomes activated whenever unresolved material is touched. Instead of immediately reacting outwardly, Jung encouraged individuals to ask difficult questions inwardly. Why does this situation provoke such a strong response? What fear, insecurity, or hidden wound is being activated? What aspect of myself am I refusing to acknowledge? This level of self-observation requires honesty because the ego instinctively protects its self-image. It prefers blame over self-examination. Yet, emotional triggers become valuable precisely because they expose unconscious material that would otherwise remain hidden. Every recurring pattern of jealousy, resentment, shame, insecurity, or emotional instability contains psychological information. The individual who learns to observe these reactions consciously begins uncovering the deeper structure of their psyche. Gradually, unconscious patterns lose some of their power because they are no longer operating entirely in darkness. This process also requires reducing dependence on constant performance and validation. Modern individuals often organize their entire personality around external approval without realizing it consciously. They shape their behavior according to imagined judgments from others. They suppress authentic thoughts and emotions in order to appear acceptable. They become psychologically dependent on praise, attention, social visibility, and validation because their sense of identity has become externally rooted. The persona slowly consumes the authentic self beneath it. Breaking this dependence requires small but uncomfortable acts of honesty. Speaking truthfully when performance would feel safer. Allowing oneself to appear imperfect without immediately correcting the image. Resisting the impulse to constantly seek reassurance from others. Learning to exist without broadcasting every experience for external recognition. The individuated person gradually develops an inner center of gravity less dependent upon collective approval. The fear of rejection remains powerful because the human psyche naturally desires belonging. Yet psychological maturity requires the ability to tolerate disapproval without collapsing internally. Many people never discover who they truly are because they spend their entire lives adapting themselves to the expectations of others. They become experts at reading social environments while remaining strangers to their own inner reality. Jung understood that authenticity feels dangerous because it threatens the persona. The individual fears abandonment, judgment, loneliness, or failure if they stop performing according to collective expectations. Yet without this confrontation, the authentic self remains buried beneath endless adaptation. Journaling honestly becomes one of the most effective tools for confronting unconscious material directly. Most people think constantly without truly examining their thoughts. Emotions arise and disappear rapidly beneath distraction and routine. Journaling slows consciousness down enough for hidden patterns to become visible. Jung believed writing allows unconscious material to move closer to awareness, because thoughts and emotions become externalized rather than remaining vague and undefined internally. The important word here is honestly. Genuine self-examination requires writing without attempting to appear morally perfect even to oneself. The individual must become willing to record uncomfortable truths. Fear, envy, resentment, insecurity, violent fantasies, loneliness, shame, hidden desires, bitterness, ambition, emotional dependency, contradictions. Most people avoid this level of honesty because the ego fears confronting its own complexity. Yet suppressed emotions do not disappear simply because they remain unspoken. They continue influencing behavior unconsciously. Writing honestly creates psychological distance from unconscious patterns. A person begins noticing recurring emotional themes, destructive habits, repetitive fears, and hidden motivations. Over time, the unconscious reveals itself symbolically through language, fantasy, and emotional repetition. The journal becomes almost like a mirror reflecting dimensions of the psyche normally hidden beneath ordinary consciousness. Jung himself practiced forms of active imagination and extensive inner dialogue throughout his life because he understood that unconscious material must be encountered consciously if transformation is to occur. Transformation also requires voluntary confrontation with discomfort. Modern culture encourages avoidance of pain whenever possible. Convenience, comfort, and instant gratification dominate daily life, yet the psyche grows stronger through meaningful challenge. Jung understood that unconscious fears retain power precisely because individuals avoid confronting them directly. Fear expands in darkness. The avoided situation becomes psychologically larger over time. The individual remains trapped within invisible boundaries created by unconscious anxiety. Voluntary challenges weaken this psychological paralysis. Speaking honestly despite fear, entering solitude despite discomfort, confronting conflict directly rather than avoiding it, pursuing meaningful goals despite uncertainty, accepting responsibility instead of remaining passive. These actions strengthen consciousness because they expand the individual's capacity to tolerate discomfort without retreating into unconscious avoidance. Every meaningful transformation throughout mythology and psychology involves descent into difficulty. The individual enters uncertainty willingly because remaining unconscious becomes more painful than confronting fear itself. Jung believed that growth requires tension. The psyche develops through confrontation with obstacles rather than endless comfort. Without challenge, consciousness stagnates. The individual becomes passive, dependent, and psychologically weak. Voluntary difficulty awakens hidden capacities that comfort keeps dormant. Finally, Jung believed creativity plays a crucial role in reconnecting individuals with deeper parts of themselves. Modern people consume endlessly while rarely creating anything meaningful. They absorb images, opinions, entertainment, and stimulation continuously, yet remain disconnected from their own imagination and symbolic inner life. Creativity allows unconscious material to express itself indirectly through art, writing, music, drawing, storytelling, movement, and symbolic creation. The unconscious communicates symbolically rather than rationally. Dreams, fantasies, images, and creative impulses often contain psychological truths inaccessible through logical analysis alone. This is why creative expression feels psychologically alive. It reconnects the individual with dimensions of the psyche that modern life frequently suppresses. A person writing honestly, drawing instinctively, or creating without obsession over external approval often discovers emotions and ideas they did not consciously realize existed within them. The goal is not artistic perfection. The goal is psychological expression. Creation interrupts passive consumption. It transforms the individual from spectator into participant within their own inner world. Many people feel spiritually numb because they have become consumers of reality rather than creators within it. Creativity restores symbolic connection to the unconscious. These practices may appear simple externally, yet their psychological impact becomes profound over time. Silence weakens distraction, self-observation weakens unconsciousness, honesty weakens the persona, challenge weakens fear, creativity weakens emotional stagnation. Gradually, the fragmented psyche begins reorganizing itself around greater consciousness. The individual becomes more authentic because unconscious patterns lose some of their hidden control. Jung never promised perfect peace or complete psychological purity. Human beings remain complex, contradictory, and unfinished throughout life. The shadow never disappears entirely. Fear never vanishes completely. Suffering remains part of existence, yet consciousness transforms the individual's relationship to these realities. The person no longer lives entirely possessed by unconscious forces. They become capable of observing themselves honestly, confronting inner conflict consciously, and orienting life toward deeper authenticity rather than endless performance. Transformation begins quietly, through small moments of awareness repeated consistently over time. A person notices an emotional reaction before blindly obeying it. They remain in silence instead of fleeing into distraction. They speak honestly where they once performed automatically. They confront fear rather than retreating unconsciously. Slowly, beneath these ordinary acts, something fundamental changes. The individual begins recovering contact with themselves. And for Jung, this recovery of the authentic self was the true beginning of psychological wholeness. Most people don't think about meaning when life is going well. You don't question it when your days are comfortable, when nothing is forcing you to confront anything deeply. You just move forward, doing what seems right, following what feels natural. But there was a man who spent years thinking about meaning in a place where comfort didn't exist at all. Viktor Frankl was a psychiatrist who found himself in Nazi concentration camps, surrounded by suffering, uncertainty, and constant loss. And instead of turning away from that reality, he paid attention to it. He watched people closely, not just what they did, but how they responded to what was happening to them. Frankl noticed that when a person lost the sense that their life had a purpose, something inside them began to collapse. Their energy faded, their will weakened. They stopped resisting what was happening to them. But those who held on to some form of meaning, even something small, even something uncertain, were able to endure far more than anyone would expect. They suffered just like everyone else, but their suffering was connected to something beyond the moment. It was not empty, and that made all the difference. Years later, when Frankl wrote about these experiences in Man's Search for Meaning, he pointed out something that applies far beyond those extreme conditions. He wrote, "Ever more people today have the means to live, but no meaning to live for." This observation becomes even more striking when you compare it to the world most people live in now. You are not struggling to survive in the same way. You have access to comfort, to freedom, to choices. You can decide how to spend your time, what path to take, what kind of life to build. And yet, despite all of this, many people still feel lost in a way that is difficult to explain. This is where the contrast becomes clear. Frankl observed people who had almost nothing, yet managed to hold on to a reason to live. And now, in a world where people have more than ever before, that reason often feels absent. You wake up, you move through your day, you complete what you need to do, and from the outside, everything appears normal. There is no obvious crisis, no immediate threat, no visible breakdown. But underneath that normality, there is a quiet emptiness that does not go away. It does not demand attention in a dramatic way, but it stays present in the background of your life. This feeling is often misunderstood. It is easy to label it as laziness or lack of discipline or a temporary phase that will pass. But what Frankl observed suggests something different. The feeling of being lost is not simply about not doing enough or not trying hard enough. It is connected to the absence of something deeper. When a person does not see a reason behind their actions, even simple things begin to feel heavy. Effort starts to feel forced. Time begins to pass without leaving a strong impression. You can be busy all day and still feel like nothing you did truly mattered. In Frankl's time, meaning was often tied to survival, to responsibility, to something that demanded your attention whether you wanted it or not. There was no question about whether your actions mattered. They clearly did. But in a world where those pressures are reduced, that automatic sense of direction disappears. You are left with space, and in that space, you are expected to define your own direction. And that is where many people begin to struggle, not because they lack options, but because none of those options feel deeply important. So you start looking for something that will fill that gap. You try different things, you change your routine, you search for motivation, for inspiration, for something that will make everything feel clearer. But the feeling remains because the issue is not at the level of activity. It is at the level of meaning. You can change what you do, but if there is no strong reason behind it, the experience remains the same. It still feels empty, even if it looks productive. This is what creates the silent nature of this crisis. It does not disrupt your life in an obvious way. It allows everything to continue as normal, while slowly removing the sense that anything is truly important. You continue moving but without direction. You continue acting but without connection to something that gives those actions weight. And over time, this creates a kind of internal distance from your own life. You are present but not fully engaged. You are functioning but not grounded in anything that feels meaningful. Frankl's observations suggest that this state is not caused by a lack of ability or opportunity. It is caused by the absence of meaning that can organize a person's life. When that meaning is missing, everything else begins to lose its structure. Decisions become harder, not because there are no options, but because none of them stand out as important enough. Effort becomes harder to sustain, not because you are incapable, but because there is no clear reason to continue when it becomes difficult. So the feeling of being lost starts to make more sense when you look at it this way. It is a signal, a sign that something essential is missing from the way your life is currently structured. Not more activity, not more stimulation, not even more success, but something that gives your actions a reason to exist beyond the immediate moment. And this leads to a different way of understanding the problem. The issue is not that life is too hard, or that you are not doing enough, or that you are somehow falling behind. The issue is that nothing has become important enough to fully engage you. Nothing has taken a central place in your life that organizes your time, your energy, and your attention around it. When that is missing, everything feels optional. And when everything feels optional, it becomes very difficult to move with clarity or conviction. You hesitate, you delay, you question your choices, not because you are weak, but because there is no strong reason guiding you. So the question is no longer about how to fix your mood or how to become more motivated. It becomes something much simpler and at the same time much more serious. What is important enough to give your life direction? When people begin to feel this quiet emptiness, their first reaction is almost automatic. They assume the problem lies in how they feel, so they try to fix the feeling itself. They look for ways to feel better, lighter, more positive, more alive. The idea seems simple and reasonable. If you feel bad, then improving how you feel should solve the problem. So your attention shifts toward anything that promises relief. You start organizing your life around emotional improvement, hoping that if you can just reach a more pleasant state of mind, everything else will naturally fall into place. But over time, something strange begins to happen. Even when you succeed in feeling better for a moment, the improvement doesn't last. The feeling fades, and you find yourself returning to the same underlying emptiness as if nothing truly changed. This is where the trap begins to tighten, because happiness, as most people understand it, is not a stable foundation to build a life on. It is a temporary state that shifts constantly depending on circumstances, energy levels, and external conditions. It cannot hold your direction steady because it is always moving. And yet, many people begin to treat it as if it should be constant. They begin to measure their life by how good they feel in each moment, without realizing that this measurement itself creates instability. Some days feel like progress, others feel like failure, even when the structure of their life remains the same. This creates a subtle pressure, a constant need to adjust, to improve, to chase a slightly better emotional state, as if life is something that needs to feel good all the time in order to be valid. As a result, people begin to rely more heavily on things that can quickly shift their mood. Distractions become more frequent, entertainment becomes more necessary, small pleasures take on a larger role. It can be as simple as scrolling through content, watching something engaging, or constantly seeking new stimulation. It can also appear in more structured ways, such as chasing achievements, recognition, or approval, all with the hope that reaching them will create a lasting sense of satisfaction. But no matter which form it takes, the pattern remains the same. You reach for something that makes you feel better, you experience a temporary lift, and then the feeling disappears, leaving you exactly where you started, only now more aware of the gap between where you are and where you want to be. This is why the pursuit of happiness often leads to a cycle that feels productive on the surface, but empty underneath. You are always moving, always doing something, always searching for the next improvement in how you feel. But none of these movements create a stable direction. They create motion without grounding. And over time, that kind of motion becomes exhausting, because it requires constant input just to maintain a sense of normality. The moment you stop, the underlying emptiness becomes visible again, and you are reminded that nothing has actually been resolved. Viktor Frankl warned about this kind of thinking when he wrote, "Don't aim at success. The more you aim at it and make it a target, the more you are going to miss it." What he is pointing to here is not just success in the traditional sense, but the broader idea of treating outcomes as direct targets. The moment you turn something like happiness into a goal that must be achieved, you create a distance between yourself and that goal. You begin to chase it, monitor it, and evaluate yourself based on whether you are reaching it. And since happiness is not something that can be consistently maintained, this process leads to a constant sense of falling short. This dynamic becomes even clearer when you look at how quickly satisfaction fades after achieving something you once thought would make you feel complete. You reach a milestone, you experience a moment of relief or excitement, and then, almost without noticing, the feeling disappears. You are left with the same internal state you had before, only now with the added confusion of having reached something you believed would change everything. So you set a new goal, convinced that the next one will finally deliver what the previous one did not. But the pattern repeats, not because the goals are wrong, but because of the role you expect them to play in your life. Frankl expressed this idea even more directly when he wrote, For success, like happiness, cannot be pursued, it must ensue. This shifts the entire perspective. It suggests that happiness is not something you arrive at by chasing it directly. It appears as a result of something else, something deeper that gives your actions meaning. When you focus only on the feeling itself, you miss the conditions that allow it to emerge naturally. You end up trying to force something that can only arise as a consequence of how you live, not as the primary objective of your life. At the same time, the modern environment makes it easier than ever to fall into this trap. You have immediate access to things that can change your mood within seconds. You can avoid discomfort almost entirely if you choose to. You can fill every quiet moment with some form of stimulation. And while this gives you control over your immediate experience, it also removes the need to stay with anything long enough to discover whether it has deeper value. The moment something becomes difficult or uncomfortable, there is always an easier alternative available. And over time, this weakens your ability to commit to anything that requires sustained effort. When your decisions are guided by what feels good in the moment, your direction becomes unstable. You move toward things that are easy and away from things that are difficult, without considering whether those movements are leading you somewhere meaningful. This creates a life that feels active but unstructured, full but not fulfilling. You are constantly doing something, but none of it builds toward a sense of purpose that can hold your attention over time. And because of that, even when your life is filled with activity, it can still feel empty. Eventually, this leads to a deeper kind of frustration. You start to notice that no matter how much you adjust your environment, your habits, or your sources of pleasure, the underlying feeling remains unchanged. And this is the point where the realization begins to form, even if it is not yet fully clear. The problem has never been the absence of happiness itself. Those moments exist, and they will always come and go. The problem is that there is nothing in your life that demands your commitment in a way that gives your actions lasting significance. When that realization becomes clearer, the focus begins to shift, away from trying to feel better all the time and towards something more stable, something that does not depend on your mood or your circumstances, something that can guide your actions even on days when you do not feel motivated, even when the process is uncomfortable, even when the reward is not immediate, because that is where direction begins to take shape. And once that shift begins, a different kind of question emerges. One that is not about how to improve your emotional state, but about how to structure your life around something that matters. What is worth committing to, even when it does not make you feel good right away? At a certain point, the focus begins to shift away from chasing better feelings and towards something deeper. Because after trying to improve how you feel over and over again, you start to notice a pattern. Good feelings come and go. Motivation rises and falls. Energy changes from day to day, and none of these things stay long enough to build a life around. This is where a different understanding of human behavior becomes important. People are often told that they are driven by pleasure, by comfort, by the desire to avoid pain. And on the surface, this seems true. You naturally move toward things that feel good and away from things that feel uncomfortable. But when you look at how people actually live, especially when they are at their strongest, a different pattern appears. People willingly take on difficulty all the time. They go through long periods of effort, struggle, and uncertainty, even when it would be easier to avoid those things. They wake up early to train, they push through exhaustion, they stay committed to something even when progress is slow. They endure pressure, rejection, and setbacks, not because they enjoy suffering, but because they are connected to something that makes that suffering meaningful. This is where the idea introduced by Viktor Frankl becomes central. He argued that the primary human drive is not pleasure or comfort, but the will to meaning. This means that what truly organizes a person's life is not how good they feel, but whether what they are doing feels important enough to continue. When meaning is present, effort changes its nature. It stops feeling like something you have to force yourself into and starts feeling like something that belongs to the direction you have chosen. Discipline becomes easier to sustain, not because the actions themselves become easier, but because they are connected to something that justifies the effort. Even when the process is difficult, it makes sense. There is a reason behind it that holds everything together. But when meaning is absent, even small tasks can feel heavy. You hesitate more, you delay more, you question whether it is worth doing anything at all. This is why life can feel heavy even when it is objectively easy. You can have comfort, stability, and freedom, and still feel weighed down by the simplest responsibilities. Because without meaning, there is nothing to transform effort into something purposeful. Everything remains at the level of obligation. And over time, this creates a quiet resistance toward life itself, not in a dramatic way, but in the form of constant hesitation, low energy, and lack of engagement. The role of suffering becomes clearer when you look at it through this lens. Most people try to eliminate discomfort as much as possible. They see it as something that should not be there, something that needs to be removed in order for life to feel right. But suffering in itself is not the main issue. It becomes a problem when it feels meaningless, when there is no reason behind it, no context that makes it understandable, no direction that gives it a place. This is what makes it unbearable, not the intensity of the discomfort, but the absence of meaning around it. Frankl expressed this idea directly when he wrote, "If there is a meaning in life at all, then there must be a meaning in suffering." This statement does not suggest that suffering is desirable or something to seek out. It points to the possibility that even difficult experiences can be integrated into a meaningful life if they are connected to something larger than the immediate discomfort. When suffering has a place, it becomes something that can be endured, and sometimes even something that strengthens a person's sense of direction. You can see this in simple examples. Physical training involves discomfort, but it is tied to improvement. Building something takes time and effort, but it leads somewhere. Even emotional pain, when understood within a larger context, can become part of growth rather than something purely negative. In each case, the experience itself does not change. The effort is still required, the discomfort is still present. What changes is the meaning attached to it, and that meaning determines whether the experience feels worth it. This leads to an important distinction between motivation and direction. Motivation is something that depends on how you feel in a given moment. It can be influenced by your environment, your mood, your energy, or even random factors. It is unpredictable, and because of that, it cannot be relied on as the foundation of consistent action. Some days you feel driven, other days you do not. If your behavior depends on motivation, it will always fluctuate. There will always be gaps where nothing moves forward simply because the feeling is not there. Direction works differently. It does not depend on how you feel. It depends on what you have decided matters. When something holds enough meaning, it continues to guide your actions even when motivation is low. You still act, not because you feel like it, but because the direction itself is stable. It gives you a reference point that does not change with your emotional state. This is what allows consistency to form. This idea becomes even stronger when connected to another statement that Frankl emphasized in his work. He who has a why to live can bear almost anyhow. This sentence captures the relationship between meaning and endurance in a very direct way. When you have a clear reason behind your actions, it organizes everything else around it. It gives structure to your effort. It allows you to move through difficulty without losing your sense of direction. The how becomes something you deal with, rather than something that stops you. Without that why, the situation looks very different. Even simple tasks can feel overwhelming because there is nothing connecting them to something larger. You question whether they are worth doing. You delay starting. You feel resistance, not because the task is too difficult, but because it does not feel meaningful enough to justify the effort. And this resistance builds over time, making everything feel heavier than it actually is. With a strong why, the same tasks can be approached in a completely different way. The effort is still there, but it is placed within a larger context. You understand where it is leading, even if the progress is slow. You are willing to go through discomfort because it is part of something that matters. This does not remove difficulty, but it changes your relationship to it. It becomes something you can carry, rather than something that stops you. This is where direction begins to take form in a more concrete way. It is not something abstract or distant. It shows up in how you move through your day, how you approach your responsibilities, how you respond to challenges. When meaning is present, your actions begin to align around it. You make decisions with more clarity. You invest your energy more deliberately. You stay with things longer, even when they are not immediately rewarding. And over time, this creates a sense of movement that feels real because it is connected to something stable. At this point, the focus shifts completely. The question is no longer about improving your emotional state or finding ways to feel better in the moment. Those things become secondary. The primary question becomes something deeper and more direct. It is no longer about how life feels on the surface, but about what gives it structure underneath. What is strong enough to guide your actions even when it is difficult? What is meaningful enough to hold your attention over time? What is worth the effort, regardless of how you feel on a given day? Because once that question is taken seriously, everything begins to organize around it. And from that point forward, the feeling of being lost starts to change, not because it disappears instantly, but because it is replaced by something that gives your life direction. At some point, the search for answers has to turn into something more concrete, because thinking about meaning can only take you so far. You can analyze your life, reflect on your past, imagine different futures, and still remain in the same place if nothing actually changes in how you live. This is where a different approach becomes necessary. Meaning is not something that appears while you sit and wait for clarity. It is not something that reveals itself fully formed, giving you certainty before you act. It begins to take shape when you step into responsibility. This idea goes against what many people expect. There is a common belief that you need to figure everything out before you commit, that you need a clear vision, a strong sense of purpose, a deep certainty about what you are doing. But in reality, clarity often comes after commitment, not before it. When you stay in a state of waiting, trying to find the perfect direction before you move, you remain disconnected from the very experiences that would give you that direction. You stay in your head, analyzing possibilities instead of testing them, and as a result, everything remains abstract. Taking responsibility changes that. It moves you out of speculation and into action. It forces you to engage with something real, something that requires your time and energy. And through that engagement, meaning begins to develop. Not instantly, not in a dramatic way, but gradually, as your actions start to connect with something that feels worth continuing. This is why meaning is not discovered in isolation. It is built through involvement, through effort, through staying with something long enough for it to take on significance. Viktor Frankl described 3 main ways through which people come into contact with meaning, and each of them points toward a different form of responsibility. The first is through work or creation. This does not only refer to a career or a profession, it refers to anything you build, anything you shape, anything you contribute to the world outside of yourself. When you create something, even on a small scale, you begin to see the impact of your actions. You see that your effort leads to a result, that your time produces something tangible. This creates a connection between what you do and what exists because of it. Over time, this connection becomes stronger. You start to care about the quality of what you produce. You invest more attention, more effort, more thought. What begins as a simple task can grow into something that holds your interest more deeply. And through that process, your work becomes more than just something you have to do. It becomes something you are involved in, something that reflects a part of you. This involvement is what gives it meaning. Not because it is always enjoyable, but because it creates a sense of direction that extends beyond the immediate moment. The second path to meaning comes through experience and connection. This includes relationships with other people, but it also includes moments where you encounter something that feels real in a different way. It can be a conversation that stays with you, a place that affects you, a piece of music or a work of art that changes how you see things. These experiences are not about producing something, but about receiving something that expands your perspective. They bring you into contact with aspects of life that you cannot create on your own, but that still shape how you understand your place in the world. Relationships, in particular, play a central role here. When you care about someone, your actions begin to extend beyond your own immediate concerns. You consider their well-being, their perspective, their presence in your life. This creates a form of responsibility that is different from personal goals. It is not about achievement, but about connection. And through that connection, meaning develops in a way that is less about control and more about involvement. You are no longer focused only on yourself. Your attention moves outward, and in doing so, your sense of direction becomes less isolated. The third path is often the most difficult to understand because it involves situations where you cannot change what is happening. It is the path of how you respond to suffering. There are moments in life where circumstances do not adjust to your plans, situations that remain as they are, regardless of how much you would prefer them to be different. In these moments, it can feel like meaning disappears completely because the usual ways of creating or experiencing it are no longer available. This is where Frankl's insight becomes especially important. He wrote, "When we are no longer able to change a situation, we are challenged to change ourselves." This statement points to a form of responsibility that exists even in the absence of control. It suggests that while you may not be able to alter what is happening around you, you still have a role in how you relate to it. Your response becomes the place where meaning can still exist. This does not mean that suffering becomes easy or that it loses its weight. It means that within that weight, there is still a possibility of direction. The way you carry a difficult situation, the way you endure it, the way you allow it to shape you, all of these become part of how meaning continues to exist, even when circumstances are limited. This is not something that happens automatically. It requires a deliberate choice to engage with the situation in a way that does not reduce you to it. Across all three paths, there is a common element. Meaning develops through responsibility, through taking something seriously enough to give it your attention and your effort. It does not require perfect clarity at the beginning. In fact, waiting for perfect clarity often delays the very process that would create it. What matters is the decision to commit, even when the outcome is uncertain, because commitment creates the conditions where meaning can grow. This leads to a shift in how you approach your life. Instead of asking what will make you feel better, you begin to ask what deserves your effort. Instead of waiting for motivation, You begin to move based on what you have decided matters. At this point, the feeling of being lost starts to change its meaning. It no longer feels like a permanent state, something that defines your entire life. It begins to look more like a signal, a sign that nothing in your current situation has become important enough to organize your actions, a sign that your attention has been spread too thin across things that do not hold enough weight to guide you. Once you understand it this way, the focus becomes clearer. You do not need to solve your entire life at once. You do not need to find a single perfect purpose that explains everything. You need to take something, however small, and treat it as important. You need to give it enough of your attention that it begins to shape your behavior, and from there you build, slowly, consistently, without needing to see the full picture from the start. Direction is not something that appears all at once. It forms through repetition, through continued involvement, through the accumulation of actions that are connected to something you have chosen to take seriously. Over time, this creates a sense of movement that feels grounded, because it is based on something you are actually doing, not just thinking about. In the end, the question that began this entire process becomes much simpler, even if it remains difficult to answer. It is no longer about how to escape a feeling or how to reach a certain emotional state. It is about what you are willing to carry, what you are willing to invest in, even when it requires effort, even when it takes time, even when it does not immediately reward you. What if I told you that your deepest pain could be the source of your greatest strength? Take a moment to consider how radically different your life might be if you stopped treating suffering as your enemy and started seeing it as your greatest ally. We live in a culture that constantly urges us to avoid hardship, to numb ourselves at the first hint of discomfort, and to seek out every possible convenience that technology and modern life can offer. But what if that approach is actually keeping you from unlocking your full potential? That's precisely what the German philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche believed. He argued that suffering isn't something to flee from, but rather a force we can harness, a catalyst that can spur us to tremendous heights of creativity, resilience, and personal excellence. Nietzsche's perspective on suffering is especially relevant today, when we're inundated with quick fixes and simple escapes from anything that causes us pain. His message stands in stark contrast to the constant pursuit of comfort. Pain is not a sign of weakness, it's the birthplace of strength. When you begin to see challenges and hardships as teachers rather than obstacles, you discover that moments of despair, frustration, or anguish can be the very fuel that drives you to become exceptional. In other words, it's often the times you feel most broken that lead to your most profound breakthroughs, if you let them. Over the course of this video, you'll learn why he believes so firmly in the transformative power of suffering. You'll gain a deeper understanding of how he saw hardship as a gateway to growth rather than a roadblock. By delving into his core concepts like the Übermensch, Amor Fati, and the will to power, you'll see how adversity can be strategically embraced to elevate your life to unprecedented levels of meaning and impact. Instead of dreading those moments of pain and uncertainty, you'll discover how to reframe them, cultivate an unbreakable spirit, and channel your struggles into something extraordinarily productive. If you watch until the end, you'll walk away with practical insights on how to reinterpret your own suffering and use it as a springboard for self-discovery. You'll learn to reject the mindset that views pain solely as a burden and instead adopt the belief that struggle is an integral part of becoming the strongest, most authentic version of yourself. You'll hear why Nietzsche was convinced that avoiding hardship at all costs is one of the biggest mistakes we can make, and how it leads to a half-lived life that never truly taps into the depths of our capabilities. More importantly, you'll find out how you can incorporate Nietzsche's philosophies into your everyday life, shifting from a default response of resistance and dread toward a more proactive stance that sees problems and setbacks as vital elements of growth. Whether you're facing an uphill battle at work, wrestling with a personal crisis, or searching for a deeper sense of purpose, Nietzsche's bold challenge to embrace suffering could be the very key that propels you to new heights. His ideas may not always be easy to swallow. After all, they force us to confront discomfort head-on, but they hold the promise of a more dynamic, empowered, and ultimately fulfilling existence. So, if you're ready to discover how your hardest moments can become the stepping stones to greatness, stay with me. Nietzsche's guide to using suffering as a powerful tool for self-transformation might just be the spark you need to start viewing pain in an entirely new light, and to rise above your limitations in ways you never thought possible. Now that we've established the idea that suffering can be a pathway to strength rather than a roadblock, let's dig into Nietzsche's perspective on why hardship is so central to the human experience. He famously declared, "To live is to suffer, to survive is to find some meaning in the suffering." It's a statement that can sound grim at first. After all, nobody enjoys the idea of endless struggle. But what he is really saying is that living, truly living, means you'll inevitably run into pain, obstacles, and disappointment. Those are natural elements of being alive. You can't escape them, no matter how hard you try. Once you accept that suffering is woven into the very fabric of existence, you begin to see that the difference between merely enduring life and thriving in it often comes down to how you interpret and respond to that suffering. According to Nietzsche, to survive is not just about staying alive physically. It's about discovering or creating a meaning that transforms your suffering into a force that propels you forward. It's about refusing to crumble under the weight of your problems and instead forging purpose out of them. By doing so, you're not just surviving, you're evolving, growing, and becoming stronger in ways you never would have otherwise. For Nietzsche, suffering was more than just a fact of life. It was an essential ingredient for personal growth. He believed that everything worth having, whether it's profound insight, unshakable confidence, or original creativity, comes at a cost. Think of it this way. When you go to the gym, you lift weights that challenge your muscles, causing them microscopic tears. While it hurts in the moment, that discomfort is exactly what triggers your body to rebuild stronger muscle fibers. He saw the same principle at work in the mind and spirit. Enduring heartbreak, disappointment, and setbacks pushes you to confront the vulnerable parts of yourself. It peels back layers of complacency and forces you to step up, adapt, and refine your approach. In his view, a life free of all difficulty might seem appealing at first glance, but it's a life that would rob you of real transformation. Without challenges, we risk remaining stagnant, never discovering the deeper resources of courage, creativity, and resolve that lie dormant within us. And it's not just about pain for its own sake. Nietzsche wasn't saying, go out and get hurt for fun. Rather, he was pointing out that pain is an unavoidable aspect of existence. And if you try to dodge it completely, you also dodge the lessons it has to teach you. Now let's compare this view with how most people approach pain and suffering today. Many of us live in a world that prizes quick fixes, instant gratification, and constant convenience. Whether it's food delivery at the push of a button, streaming entire TV series without leaving the couch, or leaning on social media for temporary distraction, modern technology makes it incredibly easy to sidestep anything uncomfortable. As a result, we've grown so used to seeking comfort that we often interpret any kind of hardship as a failure or a flaw. If a relationship becomes tough, we might think, this should be easier, and give up. If a job becomes challenging, we might assume, I'm not cut out for this, and look for something simpler. our cultural messaging often encourages us to avoid the grind, to keep ourselves endlessly entertained, and to reach for a convenient escape whenever life gets tough. Nietzsche's philosophy directly confronts this mindset. He would argue that our collective obsession with avoiding adversity actually undermines our capacity to become remarkable individuals. When we dodge every obstacle or sanitize every hint of discomfort, we miss the growth that comes from wrestling with those very challenges. We lose opportunities to develop resilience, empathy, perseverance, and creative problem-solving skills. In other words, the modern pursuit of endless comfort might spare us a little pain in the short term, but it can also rob us of real growth in the long run. His take on suffering can serve as a powerful reminder that hardship isn't always a sign something has gone wrong. Instead, it can be a natural and even necessary part of a meaningful life. If you think back to any of your own struggles, maybe a big test at school, a conflict with a friend, or a period of uncertainty about your future, you'll likely recall how those moments, however painful, eventually led to insights or changes in your behavior. Perhaps you studied harder and discovered a new passion. Maybe you learned to communicate better and saved an important friendship. Or you took a leap of faith, tried a new path, and found a calling you love. None of that would have happened without some level of struggle nudging you to adapt. This isn't to say that suffering is always good or that it feels pleasant. It's more about recognizing that pain can be a profound teacher if you're open to learning its lessons. Nietzsche wants us to acknowledge suffering as an integral piece of life's puzzle, sometimes a harsh teacher, but a teacher nonetheless. When you adopt that perspective, you begin to see it as a signpost, a set of clues pointing you toward areas where you can grow, improve, or develop new strengths. So let this set the tone for the rest of what we'll explore. Nietzsche is saying, in essence, don't waste your pain. Instead of letting suffering crush you or fill you with resentment, look at it as raw material, something you can shape into wisdom, courage, or resilience. Of course, this idea challenges us to examine our usual responses to pain. Do we blame others, complain, or numb ourselves with distractions? Or do we listen to what the struggle is trying to tell us and try to transform it into something meaningful? Overcoming difficulties can spark incredible changes, new passions, unexpected friendships, and personal breakthroughs that might never have happened if everything was always easy. And by deliberately choosing to face hardship, you end up proving to yourself that you're stronger and more adaptable than you initially believed. It's in these moments, he would say, that you begin to glimpse your own potential for greatness. You discover what you're truly capable of when comfort is stripped away, and that discovery can shape who you become in ways that might surprise even you. From here on, as we continue this journey through his philosophy, keep this image of suffering as a teacher firmly in mind. We're not going to wallow in misery, and we're not going to glorify pain for its own sake. Instead, we're aiming to understand how embracing hardship, rather than constantly avoiding it, can spur us to realize our potential. The next major piece of Nietzsche's philosophy, and one that has captured a great deal of public imagination, is his concept of the Übermensch, often translated as the Overman or Superman. This isn't the comic book hero leaping tall buildings with a red cape, but rather his vision of an elevated human being who has transcended the limitations of ordinary life. Think of the Übermensch as someone who has broken free from conventional morals and expectations, instead forging a new path guided by their own sense of purpose and creative power. In Nietzsche's mind, the Übermensch embodies the highest potential of humanity, a person who doesn't shy away from suffering, but integrates it into their pursuit of excellence. While the term might sound intimidating, the basic idea is that the Übermensch represents a continual process of self-overcoming, a person who uses obstacles and pain as stepping stones rather than as reasons to give up. This figure is not trapped by the rules society sets or by an internal fear of failure. Instead, they create their own values and continually push the boundaries of what's possible for a human being to achieve. For him, suffering is more than just an unfortunate reality in the life of the Übermensch. It's a powerful catalyst that spurs growth. While ordinary individuals might view adversity as a sign that they've done something wrong, or that life is unfair, the Übermensch sees hardship as a challenge, almost like a gauntlet thrown down by fate. In meeting this challenge head-on, they refine their strengths, develop new skills, and deepen their understanding of themselves and the world around them. This doesn't mean the Übermensch never feels pain or despair. On the contrary, they likely experience these feelings more intensely because they're so engaged with life. But rather than let suffering control them, they harness its energy to go beyond their previous limits. In other words, the Übermensch is someone who has learned to alchemize pain into personal power. By confronting life's trials, they come out on the other side with a more profound sense of self and a clearer vision of the values they want to uphold. It's like a blacksmith forging steel. The metal is subjected to immense heat and hammering, but the end result is something stronger and more resilient than before. In many ways, you can see echoes of the Übermensch in various pop culture heroes, characters who, regardless of whether they know anything about Nietzsche, embody aspects of his philosophy by facing overwhelming challenges and emerging transformed. Think of Bruce Wayne from the Batman franchise. He experiences unimaginable loss as a child, witnessing the murder of his parents. Rather than let that trauma break him, he channels it into becoming a symbol of justice, training himself to the peak of human ability and dedicating his life to protecting others. Although Batman is a fictional creation, the essence of his journey mirrors Nietzsche's ideal. He transforms suffering into purpose. Another example might be Harry Potter, who grows up without his parents and faces constant danger at Hogwarts. He's not a perfect individual. He makes mistakes, feels fear, and endures grief. Yet each setback compels him to dig deeper and fight harder against the evils threatening his world. Over time, those hardships shape him into a leader willing to make sacrifices for what he believes is right. You can also see this theme of rising through adversity in sports stories like the journey of Rocky Balboa in the Rocky films. Rocky's whole story revolves around fighting against the odds, both literal and metaphorical, to prove he can become a champion boxer. His training montages and personal challenges aren't just about boxing, they're about self-transformation, the same kind that underlies Nietzsche's Übermensch. These characters, while fictional, serve as powerful metaphors for what it means to rise above life's trials. They illustrate the principle that greatness often emerges in the furnace of struggle. Importantly, it's not enough to simply endure pain. The key is to use that pain to reshape yourself, to question old assumptions, and to forge new paths forward. That is precisely what the Übermensch does. Far from passively accepting suffering, the Übermensch actively engages with it, seeing it as a puzzle to solve or a resource to tap. This proactive stance contrasts sharply with a more passive approach, where one might just complain about problems or try to escape them through distractions. In modern culture, it's easy to numb discomfort with endless entertainment or to blame society for everything that goes wrong, but those strategies do little to foster inner growth. Nietzsche, by contrast, challenges us to meet hardship with creativity, courage, and a willingness to transform ourselves from the inside out. Another important point is that the Übermensch isn't born fully formed. It's not as if someone simply wakes up one day as this ideal figure. Instead, he envisioned the Übermensch as a potential that exists within humans, one that must be cultivated. That's one of the reasons he spoke passionately about self-overcoming. The process of becoming an Übermensch involves consistently pushing yourself to new heights, questioning hand-me-down beliefs, and refusing to remain stagnant. It's a perpetual evolution, a constant reaffirmation of your own life in the face of everything that might threaten to tear you down. This ties back to the idea that suffering can actually serve as a crucible for personal development. Every time you face a situation that tests your resolve, you have an opportunity to learn something new about your capabilities. You might discover that you're braver than you thought, more resourceful, or more compassionate. Or you might find out where you're lacking and use that knowledge to grow stronger. In either case, suffering becomes less of a dead end and more of a signpost guiding you forward. What's especially important to remember is that he wasn't saying only a handful of chosen people could embody these qualities. Rather, he was issuing a kind of challenge or call to humanity to break free from complacency, from old moral codes that stifle growth, and from the fear of standing out or breaking norms. In his view, each of us has the capacity to aim for something higher than just getting by. If you embrace the mindset of the Übermensch, you see life not as a series of burdens that wear you down, but as an ongoing opportunity to make yourself and your world better. This doesn't guarantee a life free from pain, quite the opposite. It likely means you'll encounter more resistance, because forging your own path often puts you at odds with traditional thinking or expectations. But the reward, Nietzsche insists, is a depth of personal fulfillment and a sense of self-actualization that can't be matched by merely playing it safe. One of the challenges in understanding him is that some people misinterpret the Übermensch as a figure who's arrogant or who exercises power over others in a tyrannical way. That's a misunderstanding. The Übermensch isn't about dominating other people or proving you're superior to them. It's about self-mastery, having such a strong internal compass that outside pressures don't break you. The Übermensch might clash with society, but not because they crave chaos or destruction. Rather, they do so because they are creating new values that may run counter to the accepted norms of the time. This act of creating values often emerges from a deep personal confrontation with suffering and the realization that the existing moral framework offers no adequate resolution. Instead of being trapped by those limitations, the Übermensch invents a new, more life-affirming path. At its core, the Übermensch concept reinforces the main theme we've been discussing. Suffering, if embraced thoughtfully, can be a ladder to something greater. It might be tempting to imagine that a life devoid of pain would be ideal, but Nietzsche saw such a life as shallow and unfulfilled. For him, true greatness emerges in the space where you wrestle with adversity, where you refuse to let disappointment and heartbreak define you. By doing this, you're not just surviving hardship, you're leveraging it for your own evolution. This perspective can dramatically shift the way you respond to challenges in your own life. Instead of thinking, "I wish this never happened to me," you might start asking, "How can I use this experience to become stronger, wiser, and more creative?" The essence of the Übermensch is therefore the power of transformation. Pain and suffering become raw materials, like clay in the hands of a sculptor. It's your commitment to growth that shapes those materials into something meaningful. When you see a person who has endured unimaginable trials, whether it's losing loved ones, battling illness, or surviving a deeply unjust system, and still emerges with a heart capable of love and a mind capable of envisioning a better future, you are seeing the spirit of the Übermensch in action. You are seeing an individual who refuses to be crushed by adversity and who uses that adversity as a stepping stone to a richer, more authentic life. The challenge for each of us is to decide whether we want to continue evading suffering or whether we want to face it head on and let it forge us into someone who embodies this higher ideal. That choice, according to Nietzsche, is a radical one. It demands that we abandon the comforts of complacency and the excuses that come with it. But if we accept the call, we discover a sense of purpose and empowerment that only emerges when we test ourselves against life's hardest moments. Much like the heroes in our favorite books and movies, we learn that adversity doesn't have to be the end of our story. It can be the beginning of a new chapter where we discover just how far we can push the boundaries of what it means to be human. One of the most striking ideas you'll find in Nietzsche's philosophy is the concept of amor fati, which is often translated as love of fate. This isn't just about accepting your life circumstances grudgingly. It's about welcoming everything that happens to you, both the wonderful and the heartbreaking, with an attitude of genuine affirmation. He believed that to fully embrace life, you have to stop fighting against every setback and disappointment. Instead, you open your arms to the totality of your experience, saying, in essence, yes, this is my life, and I will love it in its entirety. That can sound daunting, especially when we think about the painful realities we often face. The loss of loved ones, failure in school or work, heartbreak or health struggles. Yet, Nietzsche's daring claim is that it's precisely by loving these difficult chapters that we discover a deeper, more resilient sense of self. By choosing to love our fate rather than merely tolerate it, we begin to see that each challenge can sharpen our character and deepen our understanding of what truly matters to us. When you love your fate, you aren't just gritting your teeth and pushing forward. You're saying yes to the life that made you who you are, thorns and all. To understand why loving our fate can make life so much richer, it helps to think about how most of us react to hardship. Typically, we resist it. When things don't go our way, we complain, feel sorry for ourselves, or try to find someone or something to blame. In doing so, we place ourselves in a state of conflict with reality. Instead of working with the situation we're facing, we waste our energy wishing it weren't happening. Amor fati flips this usual response by inviting us to accept events exactly as they are. But more than mere acceptance, it goes further. It asks us to see the hidden value in every twist and turn of our story. If you reflect honestly on your own life, you may realize that some of your most challenging moments were also the ones that taught you the most important lessons. Maybe failing a crucial exam made you realize you needed better time management or a different career path. Perhaps experiencing heartbreak pushed you to understand yourself better and become more compassionate in future relationships. Amor fati says, don't just tolerate these events, love them, because they've played a role in shaping the strongest, wisest version of you. When you look at your personal history through this lens, you start to see that even your worst days helped set the stage for new insights, relationships, or directions you'd otherwise never have encountered. But how does one go about embracing fate in a world that often feels uncertain and unfair? The shift begins in your mindset. First, it's crucial to separate acceptance from resignation. Resignation implies giving up, thinking you have no agency or ability to change things. Acceptance, in the sense of amor fati, is something completely different. It's the willingness to acknowledge your circumstances fully, without pretending they're different than they are, and then acting in the most constructive way possible. You might say, yes, this situation is difficult, but I can still choose how I respond. By taking ownership of your reaction, by deciding that every event holds a lesson, your attitude shifts from victimhood to empowerment. To illustrate this, imagine you're stuck in traffic on the day of an important interview. The resigned person might boil over with anger, blame the city for bad planning, or give up entirely, convinced they'll miss the opportunity. The person practicing amor fati, on the other hand, might think, this is stressful, but what's the best action I can take right now? Maybe I can call ahead, inform them I'll be late, or consider alternative routes. Instead of being paralyzed by the situation, you find a productive way to cope. This approach applies to deeper struggles as well, such as losing a job or going through a painful breakup. By viewing every problem as a lesson, rather than a final verdict on your life, you open the door to personal growth and change. At this point, you might wonder how exactly one can develop the habit of loving their fate, especially when the fate in question involves suffering. A practical first step is to reframe your thoughts about hardship. Instead of saying, why me, ask yourself, what can I learn from this? Or, how might this experience be guiding me towards something greater? This simple shift in questioning changes your focus from self-pity to self-discovery. Another useful practice is journaling. When you're confronted with adversity, write down what happened and how it made you feel. Then, deliberately look for any positive aspect or potential opportunity that could come out of the situation. It's not about lying to yourself or ignoring real pain. By all means, acknowledge those feelings, but it's about actively seeking something useful within the turmoil. For instance, if you've had a major argument with a friend, you might see it as a chance to develop better communication skills or examine the health of that friendship. If you failed at a project you cared about, you might view that failure as pushing you to acquire new skills or try a different path that suits you better. Another powerful method to cultivate amor fati is mindfulness. When you notice yourself sinking into anger or frustration because life isn't going as planned, pause. Take a breath and ask, is there a reason this might be happening? What is this trying to teach me? Mindfulness helps you recognize that your immediate reaction, anger, blame, or sadness, may not be the whole story. Beneath that initial wave of emotion, there could be insights waiting to emerge. You might discover that your disappointment is pointing to an underlying fear or a flawed assumption you've been making. You might also notice that your biggest source of frustration reveals what you care about the most. For example, if you get upset because your creative work gets criticized, it might show you how deeply you value artistic expression and how important it is for you to refine your craft. By taking a mindful look at your emotional responses, you can start rewriting the story you tell yourself about hardship, transitioning from life is unfair to me to life is showing me something important. It's important to note that loving your fate doesn't mean passively accepting every negative condition without seeking change. If you live in an unjust environment, you can still fight for justice. If you're in an unhealthy relationship, you can still walk away. If you're stuck in a harmful habit, you can still break it. What amor fati implies is that you don't hate the reality of where you are at this moment. Instead, you see it as a starting point, a raw material that you can work with to shape a better future. By loving your fate, you remove the layer of bitterness that often accompanies adversity, freeing up energy to actually address problems constructively. You're not weighed down by regret or endless what-if scenarios because you've accepted that, for better or worse, this is the life situation you must navigate right now. And with that acceptance comes clarity, determination, and a refusal to let circumstances define your potential. Ultimately, amor fati serves as a powerful antidote to despair or cynicism. When things go wrong, it's easy to fall into a downward spiral of negativity, questioning the point of trying at all. Nietzsche's philosophy counters that impulse by reminding us that life is inherently unpredictable and sometimes harsh. The question then becomes, how do we respond? If we choose to love whatever comes our way, even while striving to improve or change our conditions, we foster a mindset that sees possibility in every challenge. This is especially relevant in today's world where constant media messages might make us feel helpless or overwhelmed. By embracing amor fati, we start to see ourselves not as passive recipients of fate, but as active participants in our destiny, shaping and reshaping our existence through the way we interpret and engage with our experiences. Imagine you adopt this attitude consistently. Over time, you'd likely notice changes not only in how you deal with setbacks, but in how you approach opportunities. You wouldn't be held back by a fear of failure, because failure itself would be something you love, a chance to refine your path. You might take bigger risks in your career or personal life, knowing that even if things don't work out perfectly, you'll learn something valuable along the way. You might also find yourself being more empathetic to other people's struggles, because once you start loving your own fate, including your hardest moments, you gain a clearer understanding that everyone is wrestling with some burden in life. This empathy can strengthen your relationships and even inspire others to adopt a more constructive outlook. Remember that amor fati is ultimately a choice you make every day. It's not about having some mystical control over fate itself, but about controlling your reaction to fate. You decide whether to greet your trials with hatred, indifference, or love. And in choosing love, you're not only dissolving inner resistance that drains your energy, but you're also harnessing each twist of destiny to mold yourself into a more complete, enlightened version of who you can be. One of Nietzsche's most discussed and sometimes misunderstood ideas is the will to power. At its core, this concept speaks to the basic drive inside each of us to expand, achieve, and surpass our current limits. It's not just about raw ambition or wanting to control others. Instead, it's about a fundamental life force that pushes us to continually grow and transform ourselves. He believed that every living thing has some form of this will, from a plant stretching its roots toward water to a student striving to master a musical instrument. But for humans, this drive can become something extraordinary when we recognize it consciously and use it to reshape our lives, especially in the face of struggle. The will to power, then, is that spark that compels you to keep going, to take on new challenges, and to refuse stagnation. It's the inner flame that doesn't just accept what is, but constantly asks, how can I become more than I was yesterday? It's important to note that Nietzsche's will to power is often oversimplified as a lust for domination. That's not exactly what he meant. While some people might express their will to power by trying to control or harm others, he generally saw the healthiest and most admirable form of this will as a drive towards self-overcoming. It's the force that motivates you to master your weaknesses, confront your fears, and surpass your prior achievements. If you've ever felt the satisfaction of finally nailing a tough piece of music you've practiced for months, or overcoming a physical challenge like running a marathon, you've had a taste of what this concept is all about. It's that exhilarating realization that your potential may be greater than you ever imagined, and that the only way to discover it is through persistent effort and resilience. Rather than seeing power as a means to dominate, Nietzsche encourages us to view it as a route to develop our fullest selves. You might wonder how the will to power ties into the theme of suffering and adversity that has been running through these discussions. The answer is that struggle is the very fuel that keeps the will to power alive. Think about times you've grown the most in your own life. Often those leaps forward happened right after a challenging period, a rough patch in school, a difficult job, or a personal crisis. When things are too easy, there's little motivation to change or evolve. You can coast along in your comfort zone, but when adversity strikes, it awakens a deeper determination inside you. You find yourself compelled to solve problems, confront your limitations, and break through barriers you once thought were unbreakable. Nietzsche's insight is that hardships don't just test you, they can actually catalyze your will to power, prompting you to become someone stronger and more capable than before. You can see this dynamic play out in the stories of countless historical figures. Thomas Edison, for example, tested thousands of different materials before finally inventing a successful light bulb. Each failure could have discouraged him, but instead, it seemed to feed his resolve. This is a perfect illustration of harnessing the will to power. Rather than give up in the face of frustration, Edison used every failure as information for his next attempt, eventually transforming the energy of repeated disappointment into the brilliance of a world-changing invention. Another powerful example is Helen Keller, who lost both her hearing and sight at a very young age. Most would have considered her life path hopeless, yet through immense persistence, driven by a will that refused to accept defeat, she not only learned to communicate, but also became an influential author and advocate. Her incredible determination to overcome obstacles illustrates the same principle. Adversity lit a fire inside her that pushed her to exceed every expectation society had for her. One reason the will to power is so intimately linked with greatness is that it encourages a proactive approach to life's hurdles. When you recognize that part of you wants to push past limitations, you stop viewing obstacles as unfair punishments and start seeing them as opportunities to sharpen your skills or clarify your goals. For instance, if you fail an important exam, you might choose to double down on studying, seek help from a tutor, or reconsider your learning strategies. If you suffer from heartbreak, you might use that pain to learn more about your own needs and boundaries, ultimately forming healthier relationships in the future. By actively engaging with your problems, you're effectively saying, "I refuse to let this define me. I will grow from this." This is the will to power at work, a steadfast commitment to turning adversity into advantage. To put this into practice, it's useful to cultivate habits that keep the will to power alive in your daily life. One such habit is setting short-term and long-term goals that challenge you just enough to make you stretch. If your targets are too easy, you won't awaken that inner drive. If they're too hard, you might become overwhelmed. But find that sweet spot. Maybe it's training for a 5K run if you've never gone that distance before, or learning a new language at a steady pace, and allow yourself to build confidence through each small victory. Another habit is self-reflection. Take regular stock of where you stand in relation to your ambitions and where you're facing resistance. Ask yourself, how can I use this difficulty to fuel my progress? Or, what part of me can grow from this experience? In doing so, you maintain awareness of your forward momentum and avoid drifting aimlessly. It's also important to surround yourself with people and ideas that inspire you to push beyond your comfort zone. Whether that's friends who share your vision, mentors who have already traveled a similar path, or even books and documentaries about individuals who overcame enormous odds. These influences act like kindling for your will to power. They remind you of what's possible when you refuse to let obstacles have the final say. This doesn't mean you won't stumble or feel discouraged. All of us experience moments when we doubt our capabilities. Yet the key is to harness that doubt and frustration, using it as a wake-up call to refine your approach, seek better resources, or develop stronger mental and emotional resilience. Keep in mind that the will to power isn't about never experiencing pain or never making mistakes. It's about using every moment, good or bad, as a stepping stone towards something greater. This is why Nietzsche emphasized the unity between struggle and achievement. If you never face any challenges, you'll never discover how far you can truly go. Think of it like going to the gym. Without resistance, your muscles don't grow. The same holds true for mental, emotional, and spiritual muscles. Adversity becomes the weight you lift, the tension that ultimately leads to new levels of strength and capability. By repeatedly engaging with challenges, you don't just build external success, you also develop an inner toughness and creativity that carry you through life's unpredictability. Ultimately, the will to power is an invitation to see yourself as more powerful than you might initially believe. Rather than being at the mercy of random circumstances, you are an active participant in shaping your destiny. You might not control every external event, but you do control how you respond. By consistently choosing to meet adversity head-on, recognizing it as a spark to ignite your inner drive rather than as a sentence to helplessness, you channel the essence of Nietzsche's vision. Every time you decide to learn from a setback, to try one more time after you've failed, or to push your limits even when you're tired or afraid, you are living out the will to power. It's not a magical formula that guarantees immediate success, but it does lay the groundwork for continual self-improvement and the possibility of achieving more than you ever thought possible. When you think of the people who've changed the world for the better, be they civil rights leaders, groundbreaking scientists, pioneering artists, or entrepreneurs who reshaped entire industries, a common thread is this unstoppable drive. Their stories prove that greatness isn't reserved for a select few. Rather, it's a potential that exists in anyone who recognizes adversity as the fuel for progress. This realization resonates with what you've already learned about suffering as a teacher and about embracing your fate wholeheartedly. Each concept we've explored ties into a broader message. Life is demanding and unpredictable, but within that very challenge lies the spark of greatness. The will to power is in many ways the engine of that transformation, converting life's inevitable difficulties into a relentless push forward. By tapping into it, you don't just cope with suffering, you redefine it as the force that lifts you to new heights. When we talk about suffering, it's all too easy to focus on how painful and overwhelming it can be. We naturally want to avoid it, minimize it, or remove it altogether. But Friedrich Nietzsche challenges that instinct by framing suffering as a critical test of resilience, an opportunity to gauge and ultimately strengthen your inner fortitude. In his view, the challenges you face are not random punishments but signals that you're stepping into territory where growth is possible. Think of it like a seed in the soil. Only by pushing through the dirt, grappling with darkness and stretching itself toward the light, can it bloom into a plant. You saw suffering as the rich, if sometimes harsh soil that forces you to dig deep and find out just how resilient you really are. This doesn't mean he celebrated misery for misery's sake. Rather, he believed that hardship could be transformed into an ally, reminding you that you're more robust and adaptable than you might imagine. To better understand why Nietzsche placed so much importance on resilience, it helps to consider his broader philosophy. He didn't just accept suffering as inevitable, he embraced it as a powerful catalyst for self-discovery. For him, true resilience wasn't about withstanding adversity without flinching. It was about emerging from difficulty with a stronger sense of self and a clearer perspective on your values. In other words, resilience isn't the same as becoming numb to pain. In fact, it's the opposite. It's allowing yourself to fully experience pain and then using it as fuel to refine your character. Maybe you've come across moments in your own life when you faced a daunting setback, like losing a scholarship or enduring a painful breakup, and discovered that in picking up the pieces, you tapped into reserves of courage and determination you hadn't known you possessed. That revelation, the awareness that you are more capable than you believed, is exactly what Nietzsche wanted us to uncover through the test of suffering. This notion resonates closely with the modern idea known as anti-fragility, a term popularized by author Nassim Nicholas Taleb. While resilient systems are those that can take a hit and return to their original state, anti-fragile systems actually grow stronger and more adaptable when exposed to stressors or uncertainty. Imagine a coffee cup as an example of fragility. If you drop it, it shatters, and no amount of stress can make it better than before. By contrast, our muscles are anti-fragile. When you lift weights or go for a run, you're inflicting stress on your body. If that stress is appropriate and not excessive, your muscles adapt by growing denser, giving you more strength. In a philosophical sense, he viewed the human spirit similarly. He believed we're inherently capable of becoming more powerful, mentally, morally, and spiritually, when we grapple with trials. Each time life knocks us down, we can rebuild ourselves to be a bit tougher, wiser, or more compassionate than before. It's important to note that this transformation doesn't happen automatically. Just as in weightlifting, you need to respond to stress in a way that promotes growth rather than injury. Nietzsche recognized that people can become bitter or cynical when hardships accumulate. The key difference lies in how you interpret and react to life's painful moments. If you curse your circumstances and refuse to learn from them, you might end up more fragile, constantly feeling victimized by the world. But if you approach suffering with the mindset that it can test and refine you, then those challenges become something akin to a training regimen for the soul. Every disappointment, every moment of despair, becomes a spark that can ignite a renewed sense of possibility, provided you choose to see it that way. It's this choice, to interpret suffering as a catalyst rather than as a dead end, that Nietzsche believed separates those who stagnate from those who ascend to new levels of inner strength. At a practical level, cultivating anti-fragility in your life starts with small, deliberate actions that push you out of your comfort zone, much like gradually adding weight to a barbell over time. For instance, consider taking on tasks that are just beyond your current skill set. Maybe you volunteer to lead a group project when you normally prefer staying in the background. Or perhaps you challenge yourself physically by training for a race, even if you've never considered yourself athletic. By exposing yourself to manageable doses of difficulty, you learn to handle stress more effectively and build confidence in your ability to adapt. Over time, these incremental experiences add up, making you more equipped to face bigger obstacles without crumbling. In essence, you're practicing Nietzsche's vision of using suffering, or at least purposeful struggle, as a tool for growth. The more you do it, the more you realize that many limitations exist primarily in your mind, and adversity is sometimes just the nudge you need to break through them. But resilience also involves acknowledging the emotional weight that suffering can bring. He never insisted on denying or repressing feelings like sadness, anger, or disappointment. On the contrary, he believed it was vital to confront those emotions honestly. True resilience means allowing yourself to feel pain, to mourn losses, and to grieve over missed opportunities. Yet it also means not stopping there. After that period of emotional processing, resilience nudges you to ask, what can I learn from this? How can this experience sharpen my self-understanding or clarify my goals? The willingness to explore these questions candidly is what transforms raw hurt into a stepping stone for future growth. Without that willingness, suffering can calcify into resentment or self-pity, which stands in direct opposition to Nietzsche's call for self-overcoming. Moreover, his view of suffering as a test of resilience dovetails with the concept of self-ownership. He frequently wrote about taking responsibility for your own evolution, rather than waiting for external forces to fix your problems. When life strikes you down, no one else can decide how you'll respond. You might look for sympathy, or you might try to blame external events. But ultimately, it's up to you to interpret your hardships in a way that fosters growth. This act of self-interpretation is central to Nietzsche's thought, illustrating how subjective experience and personal accountability weave together. If you consider yourself merely a victim of circumstance, you surrender your power to adversity. However, if you view yourself as an active participant in the narrative, someone capable of turning each setback into a new source of motivation, then you activate that inner resilience he believed was latent in all of us. Another angle to consider is how our cultural environment influences resilience. He famously critiqued societies that prioritize comfort and security above all else. In such environments, people can become overly sheltered, losing the psychological muscles needed to endure and learn from hardship. Think about how modern conveniences sometimes lead us to avoid challenges. We have apps that deliver our meals, cars that do half our driving, and algorithms that feed us endless entertainment. While these innovations make life easier, they can also dull our capacity to deal with the unpredictable. Nietzsche's emphasis on resilience serves as a wake-up call. If we never face tension or conflict, we might forget how resilient we can be. Anti-fragility, growing stronger through pressure, requires some form of pressure to begin with. So, it's often worthwhile to step outside of the bubble of comfort, whether that means traveling to unfamiliar places, picking up a new skill that initially feels daunting, or engaging in thoughtful debates that challenge your perspectives. Some people may worry that emphasizing suffering and resilience implies a grim, masochistic outlook on life, but Nietzsche's stance is more nuanced than that. He doesn't suggest going out of your way to seek pain at every turn. Instead, he points out that suffering is already an inevitable part of the human experience. Given that reality, why not approach adversity in a way that benefits you? Why not use those moments to test and expand your capacities, turning them into catalysts for a stronger, more insightful self? In this sense, his philosophy is less about glorifying pain and more about urging us to see every aspect of life, even the painful parts, as essential ingredients in the grand project of self-discovery. By adopting this mindset, you avoid the trap of seeing life as an endless series of unfortunate events. Instead, each challenge becomes another rung on the ladder of growth, reminding you of the resilience you already hold within. This perspective also dovetails with the broader theme of personal agency running through Nietzsche's work. If you look at your sufferings as random punishments without meaning, you'll likely feel helpless and bitter. But if you choose to interpret them as necessary trials that can guide you toward maturity and understanding, you reclaim your agency. Every setback becomes a prompt to ask, where can I go from here? Or, how can I use this experience to become more capable and self-aware? This reframing shifts the emotional weight of suffering, transforming it from a shackle into a key that can unlock new dimensions of yourself. It's a bold philosophical stance, but one that has resonated with countless readers who have discovered just how empowering it can be to see adversity not as an end, but as a beginning, a chance to craft a narrative of resilience and self-invention. In the end, resilience through suffering, as Nietzsche imagined it, isn't about pretending adversity doesn't hurt. It's about recognizing that pain can serve as a powerful mirror, reflecting your innermost strengths and weaknesses back to you. When you stare into that mirror, you can either turn away in fear or use the reflection to correct course and push onward. Anti-fragility takes that idea a step further, suggesting that each wave of difficulty can make you more adaptable, more perceptive, and more prepared for the next challenge. This is how you evolve, not by living a life free of burdens, but by learning to carry those burdens with an unshakable determination. His message is that inside every moment of hardship lies a test of your resilience, a test that, once passed, lifts you to new levels of self-assurance and capability. Embrace that test, and you transform suffering from a source of defeat into the very crucible that shapes your most powerful self. As we arrive at the final part of this exploration into Friedrich Nietzsche's perspective on suffering, let's step back and gather all the threads we've woven together. If there's one takeaway from everything we've discussed about the necessity of hardship, the power of embracing our fate, and the drive to overcome adversity, it's that suffering isn't the end, but rather the beginning of greatness. He never promised that the path would be smooth or painless. In fact, he insisted it would be anything but. Yet he also believed that these very struggles carry within them the potential for profound transformation. When we confront pain head-on, learning from it, adapting to it, and using it as a springboard, we uncover reservoirs of strength and creativity that remain hidden in comfortable times. We've seen that Nietzsche's concept of the Übermensch or Overman is grounded in the idea that human beings thrive by continually surpassing themselves. This vision extends naturally to the principle of amor fati, loving one's fate, which invites us to welcome every twist of life, even the ones that cut the deepest. Meanwhile, the will to power offers a glimpse of that inner drive, compelling us to keep growing, while resilience through suffering underscores how adversity can be the fire that forges an indestructible spirit. In each of these ideas, the message rings clear. True greatness isn't handed to us on a silver platter, but earned in the crucible of our hardest moments. What does that mean for you? Perhaps you've gone through heartbreak, academic failure, or financial hurdles, and you've questioned your own worth. His answer would be that your worth isn't diminished by hardship, it can actually be revealed and enhanced by it, provided you choose to interpret your pain not as a sentence of doom, but as a call to self-overcoming. The greatest achievements in history, be they artistic masterpieces, scientific breakthroughs, or acts of social courage, are so often shaped by adversity. That adversity forces us to innovate, to reassess our assumptions, and to craft new paths forward. By adopting this mindset, you free yourself from the limiting belief that suffering is merely destructive. Instead, you see it as a powerful teacher, a relentless mentor that pushes you to evolve. Nietzsche's framework is not about glamorizing pain for its own sake, it's about recognizing the possibility buried within it. In a way, it's an optimistic philosophy, rooted in the conviction that no setback is truly final unless you allow it to be. Every defeat can be a beginning, every disappointment a signpost, guiding you toward a deeper understanding of what matters most to you. If you remember only one thing from this entire journey through his thought, let it be this: pain does not negate your potential, it can ignite it. Let us close with a line that sums up Nietzsche's faith in our ability to find meaning amid life's turbulence. He who has a why to live can bear almost any how. Carry that message with you. Let your why be the beacon that illuminates your darkest hours, reminding you that in every trial lies the seed of your own greatness.